Hey there, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess with So Many Creations. I have a really important question for you today. I have a basket full of hardware right here. Every style and color that you can imagine. Does this overwhelm you? I can totally understand if it does, especially if you're new to bag making. Hardware is one of the best parts about bag making, in my opinion. It's kind of the bling, it's the jewelry, it's the extra little thing that we get to add to our bag. Do we want our hardware to blend in and kind of match the fabrics and corks that we're using? Or do we want our hardware to be that stunning piece of diamond jewelry? What is the look that we're going for? That's just one of the many questions. There's also colors, finishes, styles, names, and how to use them. It's totally overwhelming and I get it. So in today's video, what I'm going to do is we're gonna go from start to finish through hardware. We will talk about colors, we will talk about finishes, we will talk about some of the things that I don't even use, how to use them, where they go, how to make them work for you. So one of the other things that I get asked a lot, especially from brand new bag makers, what items should I carry? What should I stock if I want to have a collection on hand, if I want to be ready to make a bag at a moment's notice? And we'll talk about that a little bit too. Some of this is going to be personal preference because that's a lot of bag making and a lot of sewing. It's just something that we love to do and we find the things that work for us. So there might not be a right or a wrong answer to some of the questions that you have, but I'm gonna go through as much as I can. I've got some great questions that I was asked on different platforms, and I'm going to address as many of those as I can today. So if you like videos like this, don't forget to hit subscribe, click the little notification bell, and give it a thumbs up. All right, let's get into it. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I do not have or stock every color, every finish, every type of hardware. So I can only show you the things that I have. These are things that you can find on my website. And obviously there's so many more options. They're everywhere. So I'm gonna do the absolute best that I can. I do have a few additional pieces of hardware that I have purchased from other websites because they are things that I don't sell. And as we get into those, I will show you, some of the other options. But as you're looking, you are definitely going to find even more than what I'm showing you today. I'm going to give you as much information as I possibly can, but just keep in mind, I am also limited by my own resources. I unfortunately cannot purchase every single piece of hardware that exists on the planet. I don't even know if I would be able to try and do that. It seems a little overwhelming with all of the options and websites that we have to shop from. So what we're gonna do is go through some of the basics, and then with each piece of hardware, I will also show it to you in a bag how it's used, and I will do some demos on how to install certain pieces of hardware that I know can be totally intimidating. If you've been following me on social media, you've probably seen some of this information in the small videos that I've been doing. I've been making these like under 1 minute shorts, just because those are easiest to post on most platforms. So today is going to be a comprehensive overlook of hardware. If there are some repeats, I apologize, but that's just kind of how it works, unfortunately. And also, I'm going to be able to give you a little bit more information in here because I'm not limited to a 1 minute video. I'm hoping this video is not 6 hours. Editing Jessica will let me know how long it is, but as of right now, I'm just going to put all the information I can in front of you. So let's start real basic and let's talk about finishes. These are the 6 finishes that I carry on my website. Almost every item that I carry is available in these 6 finishes. There are some limitations due to manufacturers, due to processes. There's a whole lot of things that go into ordering hardware that you may not know about. And one of the things to note when it comes to finish, as far as matte or glossy finish in comparison to color, those are 2 different things, but the words are used interchangeably, so don't be thrown off by that. So I'm going to do this in 2 sets here. I have everything laid out so you can see it together, but I'm going to talk about what I refer to as kind of the trifecta, the 3 basics. These I think are the most commonly used and commonly found colors, and then 3 more that I think are definitely right up there with those colors, but maybe not as common or not as easily found in everything. I also want to go over with you when you're mixing and matching, some of the things that you might find that vary from one website to another or even among the same website. Keep in mind, all of these items came from my stock and you're probably noticing some variations. So let's talk about some of the colors that we have here. First up is going to be antique brass. I'm not doing this in any particular order. I just happened to pick this one, so I'm going to start with this. Antique brass sometimes is also called antique bronze or sometimes just brass or bronze, depending on who's naming it. Be aware that there's also brushed gold and there's antique gold. Those may or may not be the same thing. So really take a look at pictures or be willing to order a piece that may not match what you're looking for. On my website, I always call this antique brass. Some of my manufacturers do call it antique bronze, so I have to remember when I'm talking to them what they call it. Antique brass is the only one that comes consistently with a duller finish. It has more of a satin finish. It also is antiqued because it does have almost that patinaed look where you've kind of like rubbed a little bit of black over it. So it's taking away the glossiness, but it also gives it a little bit of dimension. Antique brass is a great one to mix when you have gold in your fabric too. If you're not a big fan of the yellow gold hardware, if this is not really your thing, brass works really well with anything that has gold tones and warm tones. For me, I really do love the brass because it doesn't scratch as easily. Because of the duller finish, when it does scratch, you don't notice it as much. It kind of blends in a lot more. So I have a few items here, and you can see that they all match pretty well. I would say the Diva frame is a little bit lighter than the other pieces, but not so much that it would bother me to mix these together. These all match really nicely, in my opinion. Moving on to silver, you will also see this called nickel, depends on where you're ordering it from. All of the silver that I carry is glossy. You may find one or two items that are a little bit more on the satin side, but most of the nickel or silver finish is glossy. This, I would say, is the most popular color and the easiest one to find wherever you shop. I have even found this in big box stores. So not even, my local quilt store or a website that sells hardware. If you're going to a box store and they do have any kind of metal hardware, oftentimes this is the color that you will find. And silver pretty much mixes with anything. It's going to stand out and give you a really bold look on darker colors, navies and blacks and chocolate browns, but it works really nicely with your pastels too. So silver is always a good option. Mixing from one website to another, I don't think you would really have any issues doing that. Everything that I have and everything that I've seen, even in, the box stores, the silver is silver. It matches really nicely. Next up is going to be gunmetal. This is kind of the third in the basics. These were the first three colors that I ever started with. And if you are wondering or just were ever curious, Diva frames, the 7.5 inch, those were the first items that I ever carried. I had silver and I had gunmetal. I expanded to brass and felt like it was such a big deal. It was so huge. And now we have so much hardware that it almost doesn't faze me. It's kind of weird. So gunmetal is a tricky one. Gunmetal is awesome. I absolutely love it. Sometimes you will see it called black. However, there is also a black finish. There is matte and glossy, and it's a jet black. So be aware on someone's website, see if they have a picture of it. They may be referring to this as black, or they may actually have black hardware. I have had people get confused about that and ask me if I have black, to which I respond, no, we have gunmetal, which is a dark gray. You can see on this triangle ring right here, this has a slightly satin finish and it's a lighter gray. Where these pieces are shinier, the purse feet especially, and they have a dark gray finish. For me, would I mix these together? Yes, absolutely, and I have. I don't mind mixing because they're all in the gray family, so it does not bother me in the least. Gunmetal can be hit or miss when you're mixing from one website to another, but I would say if this doesn't bother you, then mixing shouldn't bother you from other sites. So those are kind of our three basics right there. Now let's get into kind of our, well, I don't want to call them a wild card, but they're definitely more, a little bit harder to find consistently. Not every website is going to have those. Some manufacturers charge more for certain finishes, so sometimes they're not something that are invested in, or you might even see a price difference. So just a side note, that's probably going to happen a lot during this video where I get sidetracked. I do sell all of my finishes for the same price, but if you've ever noticed that different finishes are different prices on other websites, the reasoning is usually because the manufacturer does charge different prices. A lot of these, like the gunmetal and the rainbow in particular, those have a double finish, a double process as far as the finishing is concerned, which means they have to be plated more than one time. Sometimes antique brass is not wrapped the same way because it doesn't scratch. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, just so that you're aware of it if you're looking on someone's website and you're confused by it. And you can always send an email. Small businesses are pretty receptive to, answering your emails if you want to send them and, ask in a kind manner. So anyway, now that we've sidetracked at least once, let's get back to our other finishes. So I'm actually going to go in reverse this time, and we're going to start down here with rose gold. Rose gold a lot of times is called copper. Now, to me, I used to work in the jewelry industry many years ago, and this to me is rose gold. It looks exactly like the rose gold jewelry that we used to sell. To me, this does not look like copper. If you've ever seen a copper pipe, I find that they are darker, or anything in copper, it tends to have more of like a brownish finish, where this is a peachy, pinky rose kind of a finish. So to me, it's rose gold, but a lot of times you will see this also called copper. Now, I have seen recently that they also are selling a brushed rose gold, or a brushed copper, or a antique copper. And that is basically this same finish, this kind of satin blackish finish that's on the brass. They're putting it on the rose gold, making this deeper. That to me looks a lot more like copper because it's a deeper finish. I don't have anything with that finish, but I have purchased some zipper pulls from, I forget who I purchased them from, probably Vala Home Creative. I absolutely love her pulls. And I do mix them with the rose gold, even though they don't look the same. They both have that pinky peach undertone, but this is very shiny, as well as the zippers would be very shiny. And then the zipper pulls are a little bit more of a matte, dulled finish. But to me, I'm totally fine with mixing them. So just be aware, rose gold and copper are totally different from anything that's marked brushed or antiqued. Rose gold is also a pretty easy one to match. I have found this on other websites and ordered, some different pieces, and they mix really nicely together. Next up is probably my favorite one, and it is rainbow. And I understand rainbow is definitely not everybody's cup of tea. It's wild. It's got a lot going on. Rainbow is funny in that from one piece to the next, they can totally vary. You can see this piece has a lot of pink and green. This piece has a lot of purple and blue. This one kind of has a little bit of everything, but I do see a lot of green on it. The rainbow, or sometimes iridescent finish or iridescent rainbow, it varies from one piece to the next. So you're never going to guarantee that you will get two of the same. I have never seen two of the same. I could grab my entire bin of D-rings, place them all out, and I might find two that are close, but I'm never going to find two that are identical. So that's the really fun part of rainbow. That being said, it's an easy one to match. It's actually very easy to find and match among other vendors. There is also a matte rainbow, and don't think I'm not obsessed with it, because I am. It's a really, really cool finish. It almost looks like it's been sandblasted, so it has a nice matte finish to it. I have bought zipper pulls in it. I am avoiding buying hardware in the matte finish because I know I'm going to fall in love with it, and then I'm going to want to stock everything that we have in matte rainbow, and I just can't do that. So I'm sticking with the glossy rainbow. The matte rainbow is pretty cool. So that is the rainbow finish. I absolutely adore it. And last but not least is probably the hardest finish, I think, to work with because it is the most inconsistent, and that is yellow gold. You can see I have 4 pieces here from my own bins of yellow gold, and every one is different. These are all from the same exact manufacturer. So they try, and I try really hard to get similar finishes, but sometimes it doesn't work. I don't have a clear answer as to why, but it is a highly debated topic that I've seen in a lot of bag groups. Why can't we get yellow gold to be consistent? Why is it so different? And honestly, I don't know the answer to that. Sometimes you get yellow gold that's very brassy, very almost greenish, cool to me. Sometimes you get a really nice one that's warm. And then sometimes you get it where it almost has more of a brown tone, a really warm tone. So there's a couple things to note with yellow gold. Obviously, with the inconsistencies, it is hard to order from different websites. It's hard to mix and match because it's really hard to know exactly what you're going to get. So you have to make 2 choices. Well, 1 choice, 2 options. You either have to be okay with the different yellow golds. Over the years, I have gotten to be okay with it because I know that I'm just going to make myself crazy. So I will mix these pieces in the same bag and just live with it. It's all yellow gold, it's just different yellow golds. or you have to be extremely patient, spend a lot of time and energy investing and looking into different pieces to try and get a set for a bag that's going to be the same color. It's frustrating. I 100% understand that, but sometimes we have to do what we have to do. So those are the finishes that I have. If you go online, you look anywhere online, you're going to find black, matte rainbow, purple, red. There's so many different finishes. If you are buying from a reputable source, try out some different things, see what you like, but just know that you are going to find so many more options online. That is why I stick with these 6. They work for me, they work for the fabrics and corks we have, and I just find it to be the easiest. So now, all right, so first up, we're going to talk about swivel hooks. I think swivel hooks are one of the easiest things to use, easy to install, and it's something that I think any bag maker has probably used or is familiar with. Some of the questions that I get asked about swivel hooks is in regards to the styles, because as you can see, there are 2 different styles here, and there are a few others available. And also, how do you determine the size? So when it comes to the style of a swivel hook, which can also be called sometimes a snap hook or just a swivel, I've seen all of those terms used. The swivel hook itself, which is this part right here, it's called a swivel hook because it swivels, it turns completely around. It's great for your handles, and the hook itself can look sometimes like this. It's kind of a wide piece and it's an oval. Sometimes they'll look more like this, which has almost a V shape and then rounded at the end. Sometimes you'll see a hybrid of the 2 of them. There are different swivel hooks out there, but for the most part, a swivel hook is going to work the same regardless of what style you get. As far as the measurements are concerned, you're not looking at the hook itself. That's not the part that you want to measure. Again, those can vary. They can vary among manufacturers and different websites, but the hook itself is more of the style part. It is the functional part, but it's not the part that you need to be concerned with for measurements. Your measurement comes from the bottom here. So if you'll notice that these 2 hooks, the hook itself are the same exact size, but the bottom, the base piece of each is different. You're measuring inside, the inside dimension in here, because it's telling you what size strap it can accommodate. This swivel hook is a 1 inch, just like the one that I have on this strap right here. So this handle is 1 inch, so it fits perfectly in that swivel hook. This part right here doesn't determine anything as far as this hardware. So I have that on a handle. This is an adjustable handle, and we're going to talk about adjusters and slides as well. And this has swivel hooks on each end because it hooks on to my bag. So this is the Rue bucket bag. This has a removable handle. Sometimes removable handles are great because you have different alternatives for your bag. You might want to use this one today and make a smaller one so you can carry it, in your hand or on your shoulder. This one I can wear crossbody. So having the swivel hooks on my straps allows me to mix and match my handles. Also, your handles are usually the first thing to wear out on a bag. So when you have something detachable like this, and this part wears out, or you decide you don't really like this anymore, you want to do something different, you can take this off, salvage the hardware, and remake a handle. So that's the fun part about swivel hooks. They're not just used for handles though, and I will show you some other options. Let's go back to sizes just for a minute. So this right here is a 1 inch, this is a 1.5 inch, and these little guys are 1/2 inch. As far as stocking them and keeping them in your kit, the colors are that's not really something that I can help you with as far as colors and finishes. You might like all of them, as I do. You might like 1 or 2 or maybe 3, or you might just say there's only one here that I don't like. So colors are a hard thing for you to, for me to help you decide on. But as far as sizes are concerned, I would say that these are my 2 favorite and most used sizes, 1 inch and 1/2 inch. I don't use a 1.5 very often. I have a road trip bag here. This is an overnight bag. This is a big bag. So you can see big bags, big handles. And this has a totally removable strap as well. But for me, I don't make a lot of bags that require this size hardware. So if I was going to stock up and keep some, which I do, I actually have some small divided plastic boxes that I keep at my house for sewing. I don't keep 1.5. If I'm working on something with 1.5, I can grab what I need at that time. But more often than not, these are going to be the sizes that I use. I do a lot of 1-inch handles, so these are great to have around. I also do a lot of smaller things. I use the little 1/2-inch swivel hooks to make tassels. I also use them on small boxy pouches like this so I can hook them inside of a larger bag. I've used them in my Charlotte bag right here, which is a small cell phone bag. I've got swivel hooks on that strap. And I can even add a wrist strap or a longer strap to my Jane wallet. On the inside, I added some D-rings, so I have that option to add a strap to this as well. So for me, 1-inch and 1/2-inch are really good. And I think for a lot of patterns out there, these are gonna be good sizes for you to stock. Now, one of the other things that you can also do with swivel hooks, aside from things like this or handles, is you can make a little tab and add this inside of any bag that you're making so you can hook your keys on it. Or you could hook a small bag or something like that. But a lot of times, we want a place to, put our keys, and we don't want to be digging in the bottom of our purse or our tote bag for it. So using a swivel hook and making a small tab is a great way to go to find your keys. When it comes to your sizes here, let's also talk about different pattern requirements. All of the items that I carry on my website and all of the patterns that I write in 1/2-inch increments. I start at a 1/2, I go up to 1.5. Again, these two being my most popular sizes, the 1/2 and the 1. Let's just say that you're working on a pattern and it has an obscure size. I've seen it before. I used to vend at shows and I would have people come over, they would see the hardware, and they'd bring me a pattern and say, do you have this? I've seen 3/8, 5/8, 3/4. 3/4 isn't as strange, but a lot of times you get these kind of obscure sizes. So what do you do if you don't have the right size piece? Especially with a swivel hook, I think you can get away with using different sizes. Let's say that this pattern called for a 3/4 inch handle. If a 3/4 inch handle is going to look okay on here, couldn't I just go up and make it wider and do a 1-inch handle? I think I could. But what if I don't have enough material because I based it on the pattern and I don't have enough and I don't have a 3/4 inch swivel? Could I go down 1/4 inch and do a 1/2 inch? I also think I could do that. So depending on what the size that is being called for is, I may be able to have some flexibility and change the size of my strap. Also, if I'm adding into this piece, this 1-inch piece, a 3/4 inch handle, I don't think it's going to look terrible. It might not be ideal, but in the moment it would work. So here's a ruler, okay? There's my 1-inch right in there. So let's just say that I'm making a 3/4 inch handle. My handle would be this big. I still think that's going to work fine. I think that that's still going to be okay. It's not going to look completely out of place. So you definitely can have some flexibility if that's something that you need to do. Sometimes we're making things and it's a present or it needs to go somewhere and we just don't have the time to wait for an order. So since we've talked about swivel hooks, which are typically going to go on a strap of some kind, those also need to hook onto something. So a lot of times you're going to see them hooked onto a D-ring. I have a D-ring right here. I have D-rings inside of my wallet right here. And I also have D-rings on the back of this bag. So let's talk about D-rings, which is also then going to lead us into the triangle ring question. So as far as D-rings are concerned, just like with your swivel hooks, we're not worrying about the height. We're not worrying about the dimension of it in that way. We're worrying about this straight piece right here. So our inside dimension is how we're determining the size of this piece. We have 1/2 inch, we have 1 inch, and we have 1.5 inch. You will also see that these two are 1.5 inch, but they look different. The silver is significantly thicker than the gunmetal, but they're going to work exactly the same. Difference in manufacturers can do that. So we're not worrying so much about the thickness or the height, although D-rings tend to be a half circle, so they are usually pretty consistent, but you're again measuring on the inside. Now, D-rings can be a little bit tricky sometimes because depending on where you are putting them, they can flip around. So let's look at a piece like this, okay? This D-ring has been sewn in really close because I don't want this to flip. When you're adding a D-ring, if this stitching is not here and you're just adding it in or your stitching is too far away, D-rings do have a tendency, especially when there's weight in a bag, to turn. So now, this one is not gonna, well, there we go. I kind of forced it because it doesn't want to with the stitches. This is what you see a lot. A lot of times this happens. And the way that you prevent that from happening is stitching or riveting really close to the D-ring to keep it secure. You don't want that to happen. And the whole purpose of a D-ring is for something to attach to it, typically a swivel hook. I don't really use D-rings for anything aside from that. You can see I did the same thing even on this smaller version. And then when I look at my road trip bag right here, I could have used a D-ring right here, but instead I used a triangle ring. So let's talk about triangle rings because those are kind of a derivative of D-rings. They work very similarly. They don't always work for every project, and they're not always easiest to find in all the sizes. Full disclosure, I only carry 1.5 inch because of the road trip bag. I don't carry these in other sizes. You may find them somewhere else in other sizes, but you can see how much larger this is and how much more it shows. It's much more visual. This to me stands out a lot more than my D-ring. So this to me, just a personal choice, is not appropriate all the time. Now, even if that was a 1 inch and it was the right size, I don't love how that style looks on here. It's not my favorite. This to me looks a little bit more, I guess, industrial. It looks a little bit more manufactured. I don't really know the right word for it, but it's not as soft and feminine as a D-ring. So on a small purse, I would rather use a D-ring. On a big project, like my road trip overnight bag, I would rather use the triangle ring. So the one benefit of using a triangle ring, you can see that there's 2 different compartments here. Again, we're measuring down here, so that's how we know that that's a 1.5 inch. But this hole right here, why is there a circle up there? That is for your swivel hook. So we take our swivel hook and hook that in here, and this piece is sewn in. Our swivel hook has less places to go, and because this is straight and it's sewn in, this is not gonna tip and flip and turn on us. So it's just a little bit easier sometimes to handle than, let's say, a D-ring, which has all of this room, all that flexibility, and the possibility of turning. But the best tip that I can give you, sew your D-rings as close as you can possibly sew them, or even add a rivet in. If your D-ring can't turn, it's not gonna drive you crazy. Again, if you're going to be stocking any of these pieces, I would probably stick with the smaller sizes, or I would stick with whatever size swivel hooks you're stocking. So I don't use this larger size very often, so I don't keep a big stock of these at home. This size is the same as my swivel hook. I use 1/2 inch swivels, I use 1 inch swivels, so that's going to really mesh well. So for me, I kind of also like to keep the same size, because if I'm at home, I'm much more likely to need this than I am to need, let's say, this and a larger swivel. Or, you know, I don't need that. I don't need that set together because this is 1 inch and that's 1/2. It's very rare that I'm going to be attaching a small handle to something wider. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I try to keep them kind of in sets. If I have 1/2 inch Ds, I have 1/2 inch swivels. I hope that made sense. So since we've talked about most of the components that you're seeing here already, let's talk about the most logical piece that you would need to finish some of these bags, and that's going to be a slider or a slide. Depends on where you're looking. Sometimes you'll even call it, or you'll even see it called an adjuster. I call this a slide. I have rectangle rings here because these kind of tie into this, and I'm going to get into that in just a minute. But these right here are my slides. Again, I have 3 sizes, 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5 inch. And what you're going to notice is that the height sometimes is the same, sometimes it's not. This one is a square, these are rectangular. Sometimes this height could be a little higher or a little bit shorter. The height is not necessarily the part that we are concerned with. Once again, we are looking at the inside dimension right here. So this is going to be 1 inch inside, 1/2 inch, 1.5 inch. So the whole idea behind a slide or an adjuster is to make something that is adjustable. So I have my bag right here. This is my Charlotte bag, and I made myself a cork handle. So this is removable, so it has the swivel hooks, but here's my slide. So what I can do, now I make very thick tri-fold cork handles, so they don't slide super easy, but that's fine with me. I don't want my bag on me and kind of getting longer because of the weight that's in it. So I do have to kind of adjust it by hand, not just pull on it. Something else that you will also see, not on my website, but on others, is something called a wide mouth slider. And what a wide mouth slider means is that this height dimension is even taller because it's made to accommodate really thick fabrics. Leather, vinyl, more layers of cork. We do not sell wide mouth sliders. This right here is 3 layers of cork, and it fits very nicely inside of this 1/2-inch slide. So that's what I stick with. But if you ever see something referred to as a wide mouth slider, or vice versa, if you're having a problem getting a slide to work on something that you have, you might want to look for a wide mouth slider. That is something that is going to help you accommodate those thicker layers. Something else that you will see among slides is that our bars move. There's really no reason why they should or shouldn't. This is just how the style that I sell works. This moves. Sometimes you will see them completely fixed. So this piece right here is welded in place. There are 2 separate compartments, and this is in the middle. It does not move. They work the same way. They work the exact same way. There really is no difference. It might just be a personal choice or a personal preference as far as the look is concerned. So I brought over rectangle rings as well, because when we were talking about D-rings, in a pinch, you can also substitute a rectangle ring. Just remember, again, when you're hooking your strap onto this, you have a lot of places for the hook to go. Really make sure that you sew this in really tight so it's not gonna flip on you. The reason that I brought over the rectangle rings, and I call them rectangle rings even when they're tiny and they're actually squares, they are still called rectangle rings. A square is a rectangle, every rectangle is a square. And that's your math lesson for today. So the reason that I brought these over is because when I sell on my website or call for in a pattern a slide set, this is what I mean. So my pattern calls for a 1-inch slide set. That's what I'm calling for. A 1.5 inch or even a 1/2. If I sell a slide in a color or size on my website, I also carry the matching rectangle ring because I so often use these together. I also carry the swivel hooks that go with them for removable straps. So this is my Evie bag right here. This is using a slide set. Here is my slide, here is my rectangle ring. The reason that I use a slide set, this is not removable. This handle is sewn into the seams, it doesn't have any swivels. On the Rue bag here, I am just using a slide with with swivel hooks. This is removable. So that's the main difference between those 2 handles. They're both 1 inch, they both have a slide. This one needs a rectangle ring, that one needs swivel hooks. Different patterns call for different options. So one of the things that made me so excited as a new bag maker, I don't think that I could explain to anybody outside of the bag making world how excited I was to do this, was the first time I ever made an adjustable strap. I couldn't believe that I could do it and that it wasn't that hard. And now I literally want adjustable straps on everything because it's awesome to have options. We like options. We want to wear our bag short. We want it longer in the winter when we have a heavy coat. We want it crossbody when we're shopping and don't want to set it down. So adding a slide or a slide set is an awesome way to change your bag, and you can do it to any bag. If this bag in particular did not call for an adjustable handle, let's just say it had one fixed handle, I can change that. I can change it by adding a slide set, and I'm going to show you how you can do that to your handle. So down here, you'll see that there is a tab. This is what I call a tab. The tab holds the rectangle ring. Again, when I'm putting this in place, if I don't rivet it, I want to sew as close as I can, get right up on top of that rectangle ring to keep it from turning. I don't want it to turn. My handle needs somewhere to go so that it has the flexibility to adjust. That's the whole point of the rectangle ring. So how do I add the slide in? It's actually really easy. So I have right here a little sample. Now, full disclosure, this was a sample from something else, another video I was doing. So as you can see down here, there is interfacing all the way to the end. If you have a domestic machine, not a heavy duty or an industrial, you wouldn't want to do it this way for your bag. You would want to leave your interfacing a little bit short so that this was really flexible. I didn't have that option for today, so we're just going to pretend. So when I grab my slide, I hold it between my fingers just like this. I take my handle and I come up like this, and I go over the center bar. I always tell them in class, go to the bar. We're going up and we're going over. Now you can see that this moves. That's my slider, but I need that to not move from this end. So on the back here, this would essentially not have interfacing, just for about an inch, 2 inches. I didn't want any interfacing here because I want this to be flexible and thinner. So we're gonna pretend. I would fold this one time, just like that, and pull that down to there. and then I would stitch across here or rivet it. By doing that, this piece is locked in. The rest of my handle will loop up through there to make it adjustable. So this is what I want, because I want that piece of hardware to not go anywhere. I want to lock it in place, but I still can move it, and I'm going to move it on this edge. Stick with me, this is going to make sense. So let me show you here. Let me just take this one off. So this right here, this loop, that would be that loop right there, okay? When I'm doing it with cork, I don't have to double fold it because cork doesn't fray. So on this one, that is a raw edge right there. I didn't have to finish that. On fabric, I want to hide that raw edge. So that's why I do that double fold. So now that I have this in place, okay, we're going to pretend that I sewed it. Now I'm going to take another piece of fabric and loop it through to make my little tab, okay? Then that tab will go on here. I take this end, again, I come up, I go back over, this gets sewn in, the little tab that would be hanging on here gets sewn in, and now I have my fully adjustable handle. I'm gonna share with you another little tip. So I wanna show you one of my absolute favorite tricks. I have not shown this to anybody because it's very hard to put in written word. It's easier to show you. So what I'm going to do here, I have a piece of cork. I've already just kind of roughly top stitched it, and I'm gonna cut off a piece. So here's my handle. Obviously it's very, very long. And here's my tab, okay? And I just kind of randomly cut that. My tabs are usually anywhere from 3 to 4 inches. So I have my tab, I have my long handle. I want to make sure, because I folded this, so I have a raw edge and I have a folded edge. I want to make sure in my finished bag that those go in the same direction. I don't want my tab and my handle facing a different way. That drives me crazy. So here's how I handle it. Instead of taking this, putting the rectangle ring on here, taking it to my machine or riveting it, getting it all set, and now it's good to go. And now I may or may not get it on here right. I actually do it in reverse. So I take my slider, I put my slider on here. Whoops. You don't have to throw it first. That doesn't change anything. So I put my slide on here, okay? I get it all sewn. There it is. It's sewn in place. Now, before I do anything, I'm gonna take my ring here. I put the open side, the unwelded side here, loop that on, finish my handle, just like this. Okay, my handle's all done. I've got my seam, my end down here to sew in. Now that this is on, now I can take this, loop it on, and I know exactly which side I want. So if I'm using 2 different colors of top stitching, which I've done, I have my top and bobbin in different colors, or more likely than not, I have a raw edge and a folded edge. I do it that way instead of doing this and then possibly getting my slide in the wrong way. I think it's easier to visualize. So that's a little inside trick. That is something I do on all my bags. I kind of work backwards. Again, it's hard to explain that in a pattern as much as it is like easier to show you. So I hope you understood that and liked it. So those right there are pretty much some of the basic pieces of hardware. Your swivel hooks, your D-rings, your slides, your rectangle rings. Those are things that you're going to use quite a bit. Pretty much anytime you make a handle, something along there is going to be incorporated, unless, of course, you're doing a tote bag or something similar. If you need a slide set, remember you have your 2 pieces right here. It would be 1 per handle. I have a backpack here. Backpacks have 2 straps. I needed 2 slides, 2 rectangle rings. In order to make that work, I needed both of those. For a single fixed handle, and fixed I mean sewn in here, not removable, I need a 1 slide set. I need a slide and I need a rectangle ring. If I'm doing swivel hooks on the ends, like this one, I only need a slide and then I need 2 swivel hooks. I also need D-rings. So those are pretty much the basic, easiest pieces of hardware, I think, to use. No special tools required, no screwdrivers, nothing crazy like that. You don't need a rivet press. They're very easy to work with. Again, everything that I kind of stock at home is in the 1/2 inch and the 1 inch. I make sure that I have slides and rectangle rings, swivel hooks and D-rings, all in the same color, all in the same size. I have a box of 1/2 inch and I have a box of 1 inch. Those are the most commonly used for me. If you do a lot of totes and a lot of overnight bags, you may want to invest in the wider hardware. So we have our handles done. We know how to make them adjustable, how to add swivel hooks, all that good stuff. Now it's time to talk about closures. In a lot of patterns, even if there is a zippered closure, like you can see on this Lucy right here, there is a zipper on the top, there still might be an additional closure. Maybe there is a flap, or maybe that is the entire closure, like on my Jane right here. There's only one snap right in the front. So when it comes to closures, there's a lot of different options, and it can be hard to know the difference, hard to decide which one is going to work for you, and also how to install them. Each one installs a little bit differently. So in this part, I'm going to go through some of the different closures that we carry. I'm going to show you them in bags, also show you a couple bags with different styles so you can see how they play out. And then we're going to talk about how to install them. Mainly twist locks, flip locks, and snaps. Because those are, I think, the most used, I would say, amongst bag makers, but also in the patterns that I have. So when I'm looking at a bag like this is Charlotte, I have called for a twist lock or a magnet, and that's going to go on the flap right here. So this bag does have a zippered closure, but that's for a different part. This closure right here, this twist lock, is actually covering up the credit card pockets. So we wanted something that was going to protect the credit cards, keep them handy, and also make sure that they were covered. On this one, I have a twist lock, but on this Charlotte, I've used a snap, a very small magnetic snap. And you may be thinking, aren't you supposed to avoid having magnets near your credit cards? Yes, that is what they say. However, this one is pretty far down. Our credit cards are actually up here, and this magnet is not so strong that I think it's going to affect the cards at all. When I look at my Lucy bag over here, on the front of this flap, I have a twist lock, and on this Lucy, I have a flip lock. So you can see the difference between the two of them. So let's go over what each of those pieces of hardware is and how you would go about deciding which one you want to use. I have some examples right here. I have a flip lock, and I also have a twist lock. So what's the difference between the two? This right here is a twist lock. This is what I call a twist lock. Here it is installed. This is also sometimes called a turn lock. The reason is it turns. I call it a twist lock because you twist it closed. A lot of people call it a turn lock. Essentially, it is the same thing. Anytime you're purchasing one of these, you're getting 3 pieces. You have your male side, which has prongs. These are just folded over, so don't pay any attention to that. I'll straighten that out. So there's my male side that has the prongs. This is going to go on the bag itself. So this is going to go right back here. On my flap, or whatever part is going to be moving and opening, typically a flap, is going to be the female side, which is the open side. This is an oval, and on the back are 2 screws. It also comes with a washer. The washer is going to go on this piece right here that has the prongs. The flip lock is essentially the same thing. I put this one on backwards, so let me flip that around. The difference between the flip lock and the twist lock is it flips down or it flips up. Question for you. I always think that this is the right way and that flip locks should flip down. I see a lot of people do them that way, so they're going upward. What do you do? Because I think that they're supposed to go down. I think they look weird when they're up, but again, personal preference. Of course, it's a silly question, and I know that it doesn't matter, but I'm just curious. So when it comes to flip locks, one of the benefits to flip locks, and also maybe it could also be looked at as a negative, is how easily they open. Sometimes if you have arthritic hands or if you have your hands full with other things, a flip lock is handy because you can pull. You can just pull on the flap and you can get it open pretty easily. Some people may look at that as a negative, and I guess it depends on where you're using it. If you're using this on something like a wallet or something that needs to stay closed and maybe you've overloaded it, this could easily pull open on its own. For me, the flip locks I think look really pretty. They are a little bit larger, but the twist lock is going to be a little bit harder to open. It's going to take a couple extra seconds. So maybe that will kind of help you determine which one you want to use. I can only speak for myself, but whenever I call for one of those in a pattern, like for instance, the road trip bag that we looked at earlier, this pattern was written several years ago. At the time, I only had twist locks. So in the pattern, it calls for 2 twist locks for your pockets. you can still interchange and add flip locks, but you could also add any other kind of hardware that you want. Just because I have called for something doesn't necessarily mean you have to use it if you don't care for it. Let's say that you were making this road trip bag for a guy or for somebody that doesn't really like all the bling. I mean, even for yourself if you're not into it. If you don't want a big piece of metal on here because it's just not your style, it's too decorative, it's too, ostentatious, you don't like it, don't put it on there. You could put a magnet on there, a button, a snap, a piece of Velcro. Closures are interchangeable, and with very rare occasion do you have to use exactly what the pattern says. So I have made road trip bags with twist locks and flip locks. I've also had students in class add magnets. I even had somebody add decorative buttons because it's what she wanted to use. And that's totally fine. Something else to keep in mind when it comes to these two styles of hardware, I only sell one size of each on my website. That doesn't mean that you won't find multiple sizes out in the universe, but these are the two sizes that I sell on the website. And these are measured by the overall dimension. So when we were looking at hardware for our handles, we were measuring inside of pieces. For these two, we're measuring all the way across. So this is a 1.5 inch flip lock. This is a 1.25 inch twist lock. That can definitely make a difference as far as the bag is concerned. For instance, when I did my Charlotte pattern, I instantly grabbed a flip lock. I love them. I love to use these anywhere that I can. There's just something about the look of them that I prefer over a twist lock. I love them both, but this one definitely holds my heart. When I put it into the Charlotte, I didn't like it. And I was actually a little surprised by that because typically this is my go-to. But when I put something like that on here, that just looks so big. It looked overwhelming, and the only thing I saw when I looked at this bag was that piece of hardware. Does that mean that you can't do it? No, it's a personal choice, just like so much of bag making. So for me, I said no to flip locks on this project, but I said yes on this one and on others. I like the twist lock better. So those to me can definitely be interchanged, but again, think about convenience of opening and also the size. I have had other customers who've made this bag and purchased from other websites some smaller flip locks, and they're adorable. I absolutely love them. If I had a smaller size, I would probably use that on some of the bags that I thought they were too big for. But when you have what you have and you're limited in resources, you have to use the things that you have. So one of the other types of closures that we use quite a bit is a magnet. And magnets, I would say, are probably the easiest thing to find. You can find them on any website, you can find them in box stores, you can find them pretty much anywhere that you look. It's a very easy thing to come across. One thing with magnets, and this is me personally, I don't really care what color they are because magnets are not shown. When I open up this flap, that is when I can see the magnet. I don't see it in the rest of my bag. So if I had chosen a different color hardware that wasn't silver, it would not bother me to have that magnet. That being said, you will see magnets in all different colors and sizes all over the board. I've seen them in every color of the rainbow. I've seen them matching the other hardware. I've seen them bigger, thicker, wider, rectangular. I don't use magnets enough that I feel that I need so many different options. So I stock silver magnets. They're quite thin. You can see the open side is a little bit thicker. The front side is a little bit thinner. It's actually very, very thin. And they are approximately a 1/2 inch, I believe. Let me grab my ruler. Yeah, these are about a 1/2 inch. So for me, that's a really good size for the places that I use them. They're not a super strong magnet. They're not something that I would really want on a wallet or something that I'm going to be afraid will come open on its own. For me, like on a road trip bag or in something like this, I don't typically use magnets. I never know what I'm going to put in my pockets. So for a small Charlotte like this, just covering up my credit cards, I thought that was fine. I don't use magnets in everything, but where I do use magnets is when I don't want the hardware to disrupt the front of my bag. So on here, I loved this canvas. I absolutely adored it. I thought it was beautiful. So instead of adding another piece of hardware that would take away from this and also take away from the fun zipper and the fun pull and everything else that I liked about it, I went with the magnet because it was more subtle. I don't have to see it. I don't even have to know that it's there. So if you're looking at something and you just don't want to add a big piece of hardware, a magnet's a good place to go. So magnets are often called magnetic snaps because, again, they snap together, but there are other kinds of snaps too. This Jane right here has a snap, and these are called all different things depending on the website. This is called a fashion snap. Sometimes you might see a spring snap or a ring snap. This is the kind of snap that is installed with a rivet setter. You can't do it without a rivet setter or without a special tool. I have not used a special snap tool. I've only used the dies that I bought for my rivet setter, and I will show you how to install one of those, and I'll also show you how to install one of these. So let's talk first about how to install a twist lock or a flip lock. These are going to be installed the same exact way. So I will show you the technique that I prefer for this. I do have a template and I have a full video on my channel. I'm not going to get super into detail onto how to use this, but I will show you why I prefer this over marking and also the difference between the two. So I have right here what I'm going to be using for all of my installs. It's just a couple pieces of cork sewn together. This, for all purposes, will be my flap. I have some screwdrivers and I also have that one. I'm going to show you how to pick the right screwdriver and which one you would want. I also have my very sharp scissors right here, and I have my marking tool. When it comes to these pieces, the most important thing for you to have is a marking tool that you can remove in case you mark it incorrectly, and also super sharp scissors. If your scissors do not have a really sharp point like these are Kai scissors. I absolutely love them. If they are not sharp with a nice point and they're sharp all the way to the point, you're going to frustrate yourself when you're putting in this type of hardware. You do have to cut this out. So as you can see here, there is a hole there. And I have to cut that out as cleanly as possible in order to install my piece. If I have dull scissors or I have scissors that are too big or not strong enough, it's going to make my job a lot harder. So having good scissors is really a big key to sewing anything, but especially for hardware. These scissors will cut through multiple layers of cork, fabric interfacing. They're sharp all the way to the point, and they really do a great job. You also want to have a marking tool that you can remove, whether it's a chalk pencil or it is a heat erasable friction pen like I have here. You want to make sure that you have something so in case you've made a mark or you need to get rid of the mark, you can. The reason that I want a heat erasable or an erasable of some kind tool is because when I'm adding this part, okay, I'm not talking about the back piece. I'm talking about the front one, which is always the more challenging part. I have to finish my flap before I add that piece on. Every single one of these, the flap was completely done and top stitched before the open side was added. This is not something you're going to be working on as you're sewing. You're going to have the piece it goes on completely finished. So again, here's my finished flap. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to find the center of my piece. So down here towards the bottom, always towards the bottom or the interfaced part, or excuse me, the top stitched part, like you can see here, there is my top stitching. Again, here, there is my top stitching. You don't want it up here. You don't want it near the raw edge. You always want it on the piece that's in the front, like this, because something is going to go through that, and you want it near the top stitched edge. So this is going to be my top stitched edge right here. Okay, I need to find my center. Now I'm just pretending, okay? I'm just going to say that this is my center right here, and I'm just making a mark. I'm either going to fold my piece, measure, whatever I need to do, and I'm going to make a center mark. We always want to make sure that our twist lock or flip lock or even our magnet is centered. There's a lot of centering in bag making between handles and hardware and a lot of other things that you do. So finding a center is always going to be important. On the back of this piece, I have 2 screws that I need to remove. Now this right here is a Diva screwdriver. I sell these on the website. They are magnetic. They're not super strong. The magnet is not the best magnet, but do you see how small that is? That is made for Diva wallet hardware, which we will talk about. That is a different type of closure. This is not necessarily correct for this. If you try to use it, you may or may not have good luck with it, but here's the reason I will discourage you from doing so. When I put that in here, if I keep turning, I'm going to end up stripping this screw. I'm going to not be able to get it in and out because this is just a little bit too small. So I would not use this for this particular project. This is a standard screwdriver. This is a lot. This is too much. Does it fit in there? Kind of, but this is a little bit too overwhelming. So what you want is kind of a small to medium-sized screwdriver. I have no idea what size this is. I apologize, but I'm just gonna show you. When you look at that compared to the Diva, you can even go a little smaller than this. You don't want a huge screwdriver, and you definitely don't want a tiny one. What happens sometimes, especially with the rainbow and the gunmetal, because of the plating process, these screws get stuck. So you really just want to give it a good hard turn. I'm just kind of putting my elbow into it. Now, there we go. It's out. Okay, so there is my screw. That one's out. And I'm gonna do the same here. So you just kind of want to give it a good push, okay? And turn, turn, turn. Give it a good push, a good twist, okay? And get that piece out. I don't want to drop my screw on the dark floor. So now I have my two pieces and they're a little stuck together. I just put my screwdriver on the edge and just push them, just like that. So there's my two pieces. That is my front and that is my back. This is the part that's going to show right here. So that's the front, and it has a groove and screw holes. I don't want that right now. I don't want to even bother with that. I want this piece right here, which has the two screw holes and it's flat, because this is a lot easier to trace around and get an accurate size as compared to that. So I would take this and I come over to my flap, and for me, I like my flip locks and twist locks and even my magnets low. I don't like them when they're a few inches above. I don't like that the flap kind of, I don't know, it looks a little funny to me. So I always put mine low. I don't cut through my top stitching, so I don't want to cut through that top stitching, and I don't want this hanging over the edge. So I put it about 1/4 of an inch or so from the edge or above my top stitching, whatever size that top stitching is. I don't mind if it touches it, but I don't want to cut my top stitching. So now that I have that centered, just like this, I'm going to trace inside, and I'm also going to trace the two screw holes, just like that. Okay? So I've traced inside of the oval. Let me put this here. Inside here, and I've also traced inside the screw holes. And now I need to cut. And when I'm cutting, I'm actually cutting all the way around. I'm not cutting three things. I'm not cutting two screw holes and the center. I'm cutting all the way around. The one time that's going to be an exception is if you have one of the fancy twist locks that you've seen out there. They have butterflies, they have all different shapes. And on the butterfly, let's say, here is the center that I need to cut, but I have screw holes out here. You don't want to cut all that out. That's going to show and it's going to not work. So we would have to cut the center and then cut all the screw holes. In this case, for this kind, I want to just cut around those pieces. So this is why I use my template. What I've done when I design this is I put my center marks here. So I find my center just like that. And as you can see, this includes the screw holes. So when I trace around, it's the same size as it would be if I traced this piece. So if you have this, that's how you're going to use it. Also watch the demonstration video. It'll make it a lot clearer. But I also am doing the same exact thing. If I don't have the template, I'm doing the same exact thing by tracing inside of these holes. And you can see that's how I know that I'm using the correct placement guide. So that's just a very brief overview of how to use that template. So now that I have my markings and I know where I need to cut, those sharp scissors come in. Because what I want to do is first I'm just going to kind of start this. So I just fold it and I take a snip because I got to get my scissors in there. I want my scissors on the outside of the pen line. If I am inside, I'm not cutting it large enough. I want to get rid of the pen marks. So I am right on the outside, just like this. Okay? And every time you cut a twist lock, your heart stops beating for a minute because you're cutting a hole in a beautiful flap that you have just finished, and you're so scared to cut the hole too big, and I get that. If you just cut just on the outside of the pen mark, you will have the perfect size opening. Okay, I'm done. There's no more pen. It's gone. Now, my hole doesn't look great. It's not super even. And sometimes when you're cutting through multiple layers, the back one will kind of shift a little bit. I can get in there and just trim. Just take a little bit out, okay? But before I go any further, here's what I'm gonna do. Now I'm gonna take my front piece, and I'm testing, so I don't care where the front is on here. I'm putting my front with the right side down so I can see all of the grooves here, and I'm placing this on top. And look how perfect that is. So now I know that it's perfect. Now, if I can't see the 2 screw holes and the center cleanly, I have to go back in and trim some more. Once I have this ready to go, now I'm going to add some glue onto both of these pieces. I grabbed my 2 favorite glues so I can show you what to look for when you're purchasing a glue. This is the Gutermann. We do sell this from time to time, but we are having some manufacturer issues. So if you're looking for it, send me an email, and if I have any, I would be happy to give it to you, or sell it to you, I mean. And this is B7000. I found this online and I absolutely love this, and I'll show you why I really like this one. You can also use E6000. I have personal beef with E6000 because every time I buy a tube of it, I use it once and it glues itself together and I can't use it again. So it frustrates me to no end. But what I love about this glue is that the end here is really, really fine. And it doesn't squirt out immediately when I open it. So it's a lot easier to work with. Now, I'm not going to put glue on this just because I am not permanently adding this twist lock on, but I'm gonna show you how I would do that. Now you might be wondering, why do I need glue? This comes with its own screws. What is the purpose of adding glue? And that's a great question to whomever asked it. When I put this here and I see my screw holes, when I add this back piece on, my nails are not cooperating today. Come on, there we go. When I add my back piece on, it's screwed to itself, but it's not anchored into the fabric. So it doesn't mean that this can't happen and it can't pop out. I don't want that to happen. I don't want to be using my bag and have my twist lock fall off. Or worse, give it to a customer or to my mom and say, hey, the hardware fell off. So I glue it because then it's screwed together, but it's glued to the piece that it needs to be adhered to and it needs to stay. So I take my glue and I just run a little bit right here, right along the side of that groove, right along here. You can even dot a tiny bit in the screw holes. And then I take my back. I need to get my nails done. Come on, there we go. No judgments here. Then I take my glue on the back and I also put a little bit around here. So now the front and the back are glued on and it's screwed together. So now what I do is I take the front of my piece, it has glue on it. The front is right side down. This is the front of my flap. So I put that front side down. I put it in here, get it all settled, trim anything that's shifted, especially if you have fabric and you have little threads. Put this on the back and put my screws right in. They are small screws, and if you are not completely lined up with the hole, it won't go in. So just turn that until it stops turning. All right, there we go. And this is a great job to give to people that are more dexterous. If you're having problems with your hands, make your loved ones feel, you know, like they're helping. So there we go. That is the front of my flap. It's all set to go. I now move on to whatever my next step is in the pattern. For us today, we're gonna install this piece as well. And this piece is actually very easy to do. I'm gonna grab my seam ripper because I'm going to show you how I like to use my seam ripper for this. So typically in any of the patterns that I write, I'm going to give you a measurement for this. I'm going to tell you how far down or where to place this. One thing, again, that we're always going to do is find our center. So I'm finding the center wherever I need it, and I'm following whatever my measurement is. Now, when I give you a measurement, let's say that I have given you the measurement of 2 inches. I want you to measure 2 inches down. What I mean, here is the top of my piece. When I measure 2 inches, I put my washer at that 2-inch measurement. So I'm measuring 2 inches down and I'm putting my washer right in the middle at that measurement. So whether that measurement is 2 inches or 10 inches, that's what that means. If I haven't given you one and I've said, just put it down as low as you possibly can on that pocket, then that's also what I mean. And you can kind of test this out. If you are not sure, or maybe you're making your own pattern. I know a lot of people like to do that. And you want to put this in, you kind of want to test and see where it's going to go. You can play around with that. So let's say that this is my measurement that I have in the pattern. It tells me I want it 2 inches down. First thing I'm going to do is I'm lining this up in the center. Let's see. There's my center that I've kind of pretended. So I'm putting that in the center. It's 2 inches down. I'm just going to hold on to that. I'm going to grab this piece and check. And it looks like I want to go 1 notch in on each side. So I've checked that. I'm going to draw here and here. Okay? And now I'm done. I don't need any of that stuff. So the way that I like to do this, instead of trying to use scissors, which sometimes can get a little hard, I take my seam ripper, just my regular seam ripper. I poke in at the bottom, and then I poke up at the top like this, and then like that, just right across. If I do this and I try to rip the right amount, oops, I went too far. So I just try to do, I go in, sorry, I just lost my words for a minute there. In at the bottom, out at the top, and pop, just like that. It's very easy to do. Take my twist lock, that goes on the front, so that's on the front of my piece. Here is the back side, or possibly the inside. This actually has interfacing behind it. It's completely hidden, so when I open, you can't see it inside. It's not in the inside of the bag. It's kind of hidden in the guts of the bag. Depending on what's behind it, in this case, I have 2 layers of cork, so I'm good with that. If this was fabric, or even just a one piece of interface fabric, often I will grab a scrap of interfacing or a scrap of cork and put something in between to add a little extra cushion. I take my washer, I add my washer on, and I like to push the prongs on top of each other. By doing that, they are folding on to each other and holding. If I push them out, it's much easier for that to rip out. Not as much of a concern for this style hardware, but for a magnet. And I've had that happen in years past when I was a new bag maker and didn't know any better. So I always fold them over. Now, if you want to go one step further, a lot of people also put something over this because this is sharp. And they're concerned that it's going to rip into the interfacing or tear the lining at some point. Honestly, I've never had that happen, but I understand the concern. So if you want to put something over this, if you want to fuse a piece of interfacing, or if you want to put, I've even seen people use like medical tape or something, you can absolutely do that just to kind of cover up that rough edge. Now that I have my pieces done, of course it's going to be backwards, but I can put that through and turn, and there's my twist lock. That's the back side because this is just for fun. So here's how that looks when it's all done in an actual bag. I do see the screw holes, but I don't see the washer and the back of that part. That right there is a twist lock in a nutshell. This would be the same installation for a flip lock. You're going to have your open side. Just because it's larger, it still gets installed the same way. You also have your other side right here. This does come with a washer as well. The installation is the same. It's just more the aesthetic of where you might want to use those. Your magnets also come with washers. The magnets have round washers because they are round. The magnets both have prongs, so you don't have to cut any holes for those. You're just marking your placement with your washers and placing your magnet in. So those are actually a really easy alternative. Now that we've done these, which don't really require special tools, unless you consider a scissors and a screwdriver a special tool. Now let's talk about this. This is one of my favorite closures, and this requires a rivet setter or a tool of some kind. So I'm going to get my rivet setter set up, and I will show you how to install one of those. So some of you do have rivet setters, or maybe you are interested in purchasing one. I do have 2 of them. I do not need to, but I do test a lot of things. So I do have both. So getting a rivet setter is going to open up a lot of possibilities to not only setting rivets, but to putting in snaps like these. You can also use it for many other things. For today, I'm just going to show you how I use that to install these snaps. Now, if you are looking for a more in-depth tutorial on rivet setters, that is another thing that I am working on for the channel. Depending on when you're watching this, it may or may not already be up, but it is something that I have not filmed as of today and I will be working on for the future. So I'm not going to get super in-depth into the rivet press itself and the setter. I'm just going to kind of go over some of the basics of how you would install snaps using it. So I have a cam snap. This is from camsnap.com. I also have a gold star. The cam snap is the one that I leave at the office. My gold star is actually at home. Because I have 2 of them, I am very careful to keep the dies separated. I have them in separate colored boxes so that I know which belongs to which. You cannot just interchange between one to the other. There are exceptions. There are exceptions with some of the hardware that they sell, and there's definitely ways around things. But to keep yourself sane, if for some reason you also have 2 of them, make sure you keep everything separated. So because I have the cam snap, I do also have the cam snap dies, and I have snaps from cam snap. These snaps are not something that I buy really anywhere except from the manufacturer of the press, because I know that they are made to fit into the dies that they sell. So I have my die set here and I also have my snaps. Can I order them, on Etsy or somewhere else? Probably. I have ordered some rainbow snaps in the past off of Etsy, but Cam Snap sells them in rainbow, and they also have really nice rose gold. And those were always the color options that I was missing. Gold Star doesn't really do that. So I buy them just directly from Cam Snap. I find it to be the easiest, and I know that I'm not going to ruin my setter or my die or even ruin the snap. So in order to do snaps, this style of snap that you see right here, you are going to need some kind of a setter. You may have a different type of a tool, but this is what I use to do those. This snap right here is done from Gold Star, and this is Cam. So you can see the difference. On the outside, they both look pretty much the same. On the back here, you can see that they are different, and also on this part right here. So this from Gold Star is called either a ring snap or a spring snap. I always forget which one it is. And this is called a fashion die snap, or a fashion snap, excuse me. So that's the one that we're going to be installing today. So I have my setter. I don't have any of the dies in it. I have my cutting die. This is going to punch a 2.5 millimeter hole that I'm going to use on both halves. I'll show you when we get there why we need that. Now in the dies that I have, it's already labeled. I love that they come with a little sticker on them. This is the Fashion Metal Snaps in size 20. 20 is about 1/2 inch or so. I'm saying very questioningly. Yes, so a size 20 is about 1/2 inch. I think that works really well for anywhere that I would use this, which would be on mostly wallets and like mid-size projects. I don't know that I would put this on, let's say, the road trip bag, that big overnight bag. I might if I was going to put one on each end of the flap. I could do a double snap. But for a wallet and a project like this, or even for the Charlotte bag, if I wanted to add one on here, I think it's a good size. So what I'm going to need first is I'm going to grab my bag of snaps. I'm going to lay these out for you. And as you can see, I've got 4 bags. This right here, I know can look totally overwhelming, especially if you've never done this before. You're probably going, well, how do I know what I'm doing here? And that's what we're going to do today. So there's different pieces. You don't need to know the names of any of the pieces. You just need to know which ones go together. But I'm going to let you know that that right there is a cap. The cap is what goes on the front. It's what faces outward on the wallet. Behind that, right here, is going to be the socket. Okay, so we're going to find our socket. There it is right here. So there's the socket. Those two go together. Right here, the piece that I see is going to be the post, or excuse me, the stud. Again, you really don't need to know the names. But there's my stud right there. And behind that, the part you can't see, which is way back here inside the wallet, or possibly completely hidden, that is your post. Okay, so those go together. So now that we've kind of eliminated some of these bags, it's not looking so bad, okay? It's really just the same principle as the twist lock, where I have the two pieces that make the front, and those have screws. I have the piece for the back, and I have a washer for that. Essentially, that is 6 pieces. So if you think about it that way, the snaps aren't so overwhelming. So I have 4 pieces here, and that means I need 4 different dies, because none of these look the same. None of these are going to function the same. I need to have a die that's going to work with each of those. So this is a 4-piece die set. Again, it says right here, fashion metal snap size 20, because that is what I bought to go with these. So these are the same pieces, same company. I know that they're meant to go together. So I have my dies right here. Let's go through each of those. The cap is the easiest one to find, because you can see that that's where that piece is going to fit. On the back of that, I put an X, because I want to make sure that I know my 2 sets, and then I don't have to look every time. For my socket, all I have to do is look at the bottom, and here I found the socket. And the way that I know that this is correct is because there's a little post in the middle, and there's a circle where that's going to fit. So those 2, I put little X's on the bottom, so I know that they go together. So there's that set. That's for the front of my wallet. And here's my other 2 sets. So this one right here just has a post, doesn't really have anything else. I know that that's what that piece is going to go on. So that stays here. And right here, you can see that there is a circle in the middle where that is going to fit really nicely. So now I know what dies have to go together. So I have my cap and my socket, I have my post and my stud. So the first thing that I'm going to do is find my center. I did find the center on the flap here. Now on the other version, we did also start with the flap, okay? So we're gonna do the same thing. And the reason is I'm gonna show you an easy way that you can line that up and make sure that you get your back perfectly aligned. So I'm gonna start with my flap. Here's my demo piece again. I'm measuring, I'm finding my center, I'm doing whatever I need to do for my mark, and I want it towards the bottom of my flap. I wanna be real careful because I need that hole to not be too close to the edge, because I don't want this to happen. I don't want it to be falling off the edge. So again, I'm gonna move it up maybe 1/4 of an inch or so. And I'm just gonna mark where I want to make my hole. So there is my hole for that part right there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to put in the base part and also the punch into my rivet setter. You're gonna twist the top part in until it stops. You don't need to over twist, you don't wanna get it stuck in there. This piece just drops in, it just sits like that. I don't really tighten this screw at all or do anything, I just let that sit. So I'm gonna have to stand this up, okay. And now I'm going to align this under here. And just like that, I would not normally be doing this so awkwardly, I would turn it towards me, but just for you. So now I have that punched, and I'm just gonna poke that little piece out that was stuck. Now I have my hole. So now I'm going to place my cap on the front of my flap. So that's gonna be the front part. And I'm going to place the socket on the back here. You can kind of tell that's the back. That's gonna go right on here just like that. Now they're not gonna snap together. So I'm just gonna set that aside for just a minute. Take my pieces out. I'm gonna put my cap right here. So the cap is on the bottom. And I'm going to screw in this part for the socket. And now I'm gonna turn this. I'm just gonna gently put this in place. I can feel that the cap is not moving. It means it's in the right place. I've got my dies in and I'm gonna give it a good push. Okay, sometimes it gets stuck on there, it's fine. There's my piece right there. It's really pretty, I love that rose gold. Let's see how it looks with other rose gold. Looks pretty good. I think it's a great match. So that is the front of my flap. Now I have the back side. And a lot of times with these snaps, I don't give measurements because I don't always know the measurement. Sometimes depending on what I'm gonna put in the wallet, I might want to adjust it. So I might want it really tight, or I might want to move it up, have a little bit of extra room there. Regardless of where I'm going to put it, here's the way that I mark. So I'm going to take my flap and I'm going to grab this piece right here. Whoop. Easier said than done. So I'm going to take this piece right here. I'm not snapping it in because that will be a pain to get it out, but I'm just going to kind of set it in there, and I'll bring this down and kind of decide where exactly I want my piece to go. Okay, so I'm just moving it, and I've decided that that's a good spot right there. So I'm just going to gently lift that up just like that, and now I can kind of just get my pen under here, and I know that I want to be in this vicinity. And then I can also just go back in, make sure that I am even, and right there is going to be my hole. So now I know where I want to punch that hole. So I'm going to switch my dies out again. Does anybody else still say righty-tighty, lefty-loosey whenever they're putting something in, or is that just me? I hope it's not just me. So I do that. Punch my hole. Boop. Okay. Get that little piece out. It's punched, just gets stuck. Okay. I'm going to put these away because I don't need these anymore. I keep my bags because they're labeled, and I also keep one of these. I just kind of made this on a scrap of cork inside of here, so if I'm ever doubtful or if I lose my tag, I know exactly what that piece is for. Just a little thing I do. So I'm gonna switch these out. Okay. I also have to say, and again, I will do a rivet setter video that has both of them included, so you can see the things you get from each brand and what I like and don't like. Their cutting dies, their hole punch dies from Cam Snap, top notch. I don't love the ones from Gold Star, but that's for another day. All right, so I have my pieces in. Now my flap, this is the front, it's coming down. It needs to snap onto this little piece right here, so that has to go on the front. On the back, I'm going to put my little post that sits on top. Again, they're not snapped together. And I need to set that on top of that little prong and push. And there we go. So now I have my snap. So just like here and here, now I have my little snap. These snaps are really fun, and when we're saying snap, like a magnetic snap, most of the time magnetic snaps you're not going to see. This type of snap you are going to see. This is a single cap snap. Say that 3 times fast. They do also make double cap snaps. And the difference is that, again, there's 2 caps. So on the back here, you would have a cap, and that's going to be for something where you want to see the nice side on both of the pieces. So maybe you're making a little key ring, or you're making something where the backside shows. In these, wallet examples, you don't see the backside, so it doesn't matter. That I can use the post part. But for the double cap snaps, you would use those on something where you would be seeing both sides. Maybe you have a little wallet like this, or a little card holder, and you want this side to be pretty. This isn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's not the most attractive either. So you can also get double cap snaps, and you can get plastic snaps, and so many other things. So I think that might do it for those types of closures. Those are kind of the general closures. Then there's going to be closures that are going to be bag specific, and we're going to talk about those next. So we talked about some of the general, kind of generic type of closures. Closures that you can use on bags and wallets. They come in different sizes and colors, but are fairly interchangeable. Now we're going to talk about something that's a lot more specific due to its size and the way that it closes. We're going to talk about Diva frames, mini Diva frames, and Kisslock frames. So again, these are the styles and the kind that I sell on the website, but you are going to see other ones out there. So let's go over the frames themselves first, and then we'll talk about how they are installed. And of course, we have to talk about these tiny little screws. Unfortunately, that is where this has come. So these are Diva frames. The reason they are called Diva frames is because of the Diva wallet pattern that I designed 11 years ago. That sounded really crazy. I can't believe it's been that long. But anyway, you may see on other people's websites that they are also called Diva frames. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but toot toot, it is because of my pattern. However, you will also see these frames on other websites called wallet frames, metal wallet frames, two-piece wallet frames, and they are two pieces. So you have two completely separating pieces. So that is what makes this really specific. I can't just decide, well, I'm in the middle of making a Jane or a Lucy or anything else that, you know what, I think I'm going to use this as my closure. I have to be very specific when I use this because of the channel in which the fabric has to go. If my wallet is not the right size or my bag is not the right size, it's not going to fit. This is not a generic closure that I can interchange. I have seen many other patterns that use these types of closures, more the big one than the small one. I have seen the small one used, but it's mostly the big ones that I've seen. I've seen them in various wallet patterns and clutch patterns and things of that nature. One of the questions that I get asked quite a bit is, are the frames that we sell open-ended or closed? And as you can see, they are closed. Apparently, they do also have this style with open ends. I personally have not seen them, but the reason for that is whatever the project they are going on is, the ends need to be open because I believe the other pieces would extend further. This is closing up the wallet. It's sitting perfectly on the wallet and enclosing the top edge, which is actually a raw edge. This is not finished underneath here. So for my particular ones, I wouldn't want an open end. I would want a closed end. I have seen these in many different finishes. I've also seen them with different style closure types, like the little hinge part right here. I've seen them with many different styles. This is just the version that we sell on the website. We have solid and we also have embossed. Just gives you a little extra something. The embossed shows scratches less. Those tend to be my favorite because wallets get beat up. These wallets have been used and abused and they have been around, so they've definitely gotten some wear and tear. And I think that the embossed frame is holding up pretty well. This one is probably 8 to 10 years old, and you can see it's starting to get some wear and tear. This was never used as a wallet. It was a show sample. So it was opened and closed more times than any wallet you will ever use in your life, and people touched it a lot. So this one's definitely shown some wear and tear. Unfortunately, it's the only sample I had nearby, so it's the one that I had to grab. So when it comes to these frames, one of the things that I absolutely despise, and I'm guessing if you've used them, you do too, it's those itty bitty holes and those itty bitty screws. They drive me absolutely bonkers, and I'm going to show you today some of the tricks that I do to salvage a perfectly good frame when the screws and the holes are just not cooperating. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. Now we're just going to skip over here just to show you the Kisslock frames, just so that you know what that term means. So this is a Kisslock frame. It is called that because of the way that the ball at the top, they kiss together. That's really the whole reason. Sometimes they are called a U-shaped frame or a C-shaped frame. Sometimes they are just called like a vintage frame because you see this a lot in vintage purses. And so this frame opens all the way flat. It doesn't open this way. It's hinged just to open flat like that. And it has channels all the way along here. And that is for glue. We use that same kind of glue that we talked about earlier with the twist lock and the flip lock. Use that in this kind of a frame. I have also seen these with screws, and I would absolutely not use one of those. If you like them, please don't take offense to that. But the amount of issues I've had with the tiny screws for these, I don't want to mess around with another piece of hardware with those tiny screws. So for me, screws are a no. I try to avoid them. Obviously, I can't with this. But I would actually prefer to glue. I think the gluing, once you get the hang of it, is actually not that hard. Now, I don't have an unfinished piece here that I am able to show you, but brief overview on these bags right here. This is a pleated clutch, and this is actually the Laurel frame bag. This one opens pretty wide. You can see it's a pretty chunky bag. This is more of a clutch. I love this bag. The Kisslock frames, you are going to put glue inside the frame. This is why you want something with a fine tip. And you're also going to put some glue on the fabric, and you're going to let it dry for about 3 to 4 minutes. It's not going to be fully dry, but it's going to be tacky, so you're not making a giant mess. And then you're going to be sliding this on. Grab a butter knife, grab a flat screwdriver, grab anything that you can use to gently push your fabric in. If you're interested, I can do an entire tutorial on that. I would be happy to walk you through. Laurel is on the list of patterns to cover as well, and it would be in that when I get to that video. But these Kisslock frames also have these little tabs right here, which, as you can see on this one, I use swivel hooks and I made a chain, or a strap, excuse me. So I have a little handle here. When I'm not using that, I tuck those inside the bag, close it, and now I don't have to worry about that. I can do the same thing on here. This is an older frame that didn't have the tabs, but if I did, I would just pop them out, and then I would add on whatever handle I wanted. So the Kisslock frames are fairly simple. They are very project oriented. These are an 8x3 frame. That means that they are 8 across and they are 3 deep. These are the only size that we carry. We have some colors, we have 4 different options, but this is the only size because it's based on the patterns that I have. You can find Kisslock frames in different sizes, different finishes. You can even find some that you hand sew. Those I've seen before. Those are kind of, to me, that they go better with, let's say, like a knitted or a crocheted or a beaded bag, something really fancy, where if I'm gonna sew this on the machine, I'm probably just going to put this on here. I don't think I would really wanna hand sew that, but there are different variations of Kisslock frames. So let's go back. Let's look at our Diva frames here and our Diva wallets and talk about the screws. So before, when we were looking at screwdrivers, I showed you this little guy. If you are going to do any of these wallets and use any of these frames, I would highly suggest that you spend the money, they're not very expensive, and get one of these screwdrivers. So this is the Diva screwdriver. This screwdriver is specifically made for these screws. Sometimes they are magnetized. Unfortunately, because the tips are so small, they don't always stay magnetized. This one is not really doing its job, but that's easy fix. You can put this inside of a magnetic pin dish or near a magnet and it will remagnetize. But what I do is, when it is working, is I kind of dip it in here and pull my screw out. But even if I can't do that, I will show you how to get the screws and not make it too hard. I have acrylic fingernails and sometimes it's hard to pick things up, and even I can do this. So you have your screwdriver here. This end turns because it's made to be ergonomic. When I put this in my hand, I can use my fingers to twist instead of doing this with my wrist, which after making too many wallets is gonna hurt my wrist. So when it comes to the frame itself, you have your 2 pieces here. This one still has the plastic wrap on it. I took it off of this one. So we have 4 screw holes. This is the inside. So this goes inside the wallet, just like that. So this goes inside of the wallet. And then we have this piece over here with another 4 screw holes. So it's a 2-piece frame. Your wallet starts out totally flat. These slide on in the end. Can you add glue? Yes. Do you have to add glue? That's up to you. I do, because I don't trust the screws on their own, and sometimes the screws give me problems just like they do for you. So here's a couple of solutions. This may not make everybody happy, but I have been doing this for years, and this is what I find works the best. When I have my frame and my hole is too small and I can't get the screw in, I will take a pair of needle nose pliers, something like this, and I will put it inside. I'm not gonna do it on this frame because this is still for sale, but I will put it inside and I will kind of just gently work my way around enlarging the hole. So I know what you're thinking. If you do that, aren't you affecting the threads in the hole? Yes. But then I take my screw and I glue it in place. So it just finishes this. Again, that's why I like to add glue inside these frames. If the screw is not fitting because the hole is too big, I also glue it in place. So instead of relying just on the screws or taking a perfectly good, unscratched, brand new frame and throwing it in the garbage, I just use the glue and the screws as decoration instead of worrying about the functionality. If I glue this onto my wallet and the screws are at least in there to make it look finished, I'm good to go. So one of the other questions that I get asked a lot with any of my wallets that use these frames is, how do you cut this? How do you make this perfect? Well, first step, we don't need to cut that oval. I'm gonna show you. Let me grab my little sample here. Just gonna slide this out of the way. So we've got our wallet done, okay? And, oh, that's ironic. I did not plan that, but look at that, it fits perfectly. Seriously, that was not meant to be. Well, I guess it was meant to be. So I have my finished wallet. I'm gonna slide this on and I'm going to do my marking, okay? So I'm checking everything. This is where I want this piece. Side note, that to me is the front. I don't know why, but I always consider that kind of the front of the wallet. I guess because that doesn't have a closure on it. So if I have something decorative or a tag or something, I always put the open side on the front. That's just something that I like to do. Okay, back to marking. So I have my piece here, I mark, okay? Now on this sample, I do have stitching real close to the edge. You also want to do that. You want to stitch right along here as close to the edge as you can. That's going to compact everything and make it easier to slide into the frame. So I stitch no more than 1/8 of an inch. Get all my stuff in there, get it ready to go. You can even go a little bit further. As long as the stitching isn't sticking out here, you're fine. So I do that. Now I have this oval. So should I cut the oval out? No. Again, this is why we want our good scissors. So what I do is I put my scissors on the outside of that line, on the outside of that line, and then I cut straight across, okay? Easier when I have thinner fabrics, obviously. So there is the mark. I'm still on the outside of that pen line, and I just cut across. So here's the big fear. What if I cut this too deep? What if I go too far in? Okay, so I slide my frame on, and let's say that my frame looks like this. It's all the way on, but that's how it's looking. Go ahead and just trim that a little bit. Just give it a little trim with your rotary cutter or your scissors. It's not a big deal. What if I trim these sides too far out? That's not really possible, and I'll show you. I'm gonna trim this one way far out. Okay, get rid of that. I screwed that up. I don't know how I did it. I cut it way too big. When I put this on here, nobody knows. So it's totally fine. So now I've got the outside of my bag. I turn it over to the lining, put my screws in. The same thing on this side, except I don't have to cut any openings. I just slide this on the other end of my wallet. Don't have to cut a thing. Put that right in there, put my screws in, and I'm good to go. If you're going to add glue, which I do typically, again, because of the screw issue, you want to put the glue inside of the frame. It's going to make less of a mess. And the reason I don't put it on both, this Kisslock is only held on by glue. I want the glue on either side to adhere together and make a strong bond. This is just being glued onto here. While it's drying, the screws are holding it in place. So that's why I just put the glue in the frame, slide it on, add the screws, and set it aside. You're gonna do the same thing when you have your mini Diva frame, same exact thing. And really that's about it. Those are all of the tips for the Diva frames. Oh, and I did tell you I was gonna show you how to put the screws in. So let me do that too. I've got my piece here and I just kind of push one of the screws up towards the top, okay? I don't like to dump them out on the table because I'm always afraid they're gonna go flying. And I'm just gonna grab it between my fingers and I have the flat side up. I put my screwdriver in, and before I do anything, I kind of, see how I'm holding it like this? And then I set it right in there, and now I can screw that in place. So I just kind of tip it down, if that makes any sense. Again, if you have a magnetized screwdriver, it does make it a lot easier. And I definitely would not recommend just dumping your screws all over the place. If you have like a little container, or you have something magnetic that you can put them on, but these little things bounce around, and once they're on your carpet, you will never, ever find them again. We do sell individual bags of screws on the website because they do get lost quite often. Let's talk a little bit about key rings or key fobs. I think this is definitely an underestimated little piece of hardware. I think I even kind of forget about them sometimes. This is my personal wallet. This is my Jane. And yes, these are my keys. I carry it this way. So this is how I carry all of my things around with me. I'll take this off of here for a minute. So here is my keychain, okay? It's big enough that I can put around my wrist. I've got my key fob, I've got all of my keys on here. And these are actually super easy to make, easy to adjust, great for scraps. They're a really fun thing to add. I actually have used this as a wrist strap on like my Sammy wallet. I don't have that sample with me right now, but if you wanted to add a wrist strap to any bag, you could make it with a swivel hook, or you could make it with one of these. And I think sometimes we forget about them and also get a little bit intimidated because how do you close these? Do I need to buy special tools? Do I have to get those key fob or, you know, those special pliers? And the answer for me is no. These, I have two ways of putting them on. One uses a pair of pliers and one actually uses my cam snap, and I'll show you both of those. So this is the piece right here. It's a 2-piece little key fob. You have the part that's going to hold your fabric, and then you have your little key ring. So inside of this piece, you can see just on one side, there are 3 little teeth. They're little triangular prongs. That is what's going to grip into your fabric or your cork. And then when you close this, just like I have on here, that's gonna stay closed and stay nice and tight. Now, I also usually add glue to these. You can skip the glue if you want to. This one I know is in there pretty secure. Sometimes, especially with fabric, because fabric can rip, I'm a little bit more cautious and I will usually put glue. This one, I did not have my glue nearby and it seems to be holding up just fine. So what you're gonna do is you're going to make a handle, just like you would normally make a handle. These are 1 1/4 inch finished. So if you are folding it 4 times like your normal handle, you're going to, you're going to cut a piece that is 4 times 1 1/4 inch. So that's gonna be 5 inches, and you're gonna make it whatever length you want. If you want it to be small, you can make it small. If you want it to be longer to fit on your wrist, you can do that. This is the wrong size, but just for demo purposes, this is 1 inch. And I don't particularly care for that. I don't like it hanging over. This would be wider if I was actually finishing it. So I would sew my ends right here. I sew about 1/8 inch, keep that closed. That's gonna help for the next step. It's going to help to not have this kind of making me crazy while I'm trying to close it. I put a little glue inside that channel down there. Nothing crazy. I don't want it coming out the little holes back here. Just put a little glue. I put my piece in there, and then I'm going to take, if I'm using pliers, and I'm just gonna cover this with maybe a piece of batting or a piece of fleece, something to keep it from getting scratched. Then I'm just gonna take any pair of pliers and I'm gonna go ahead and pinch that closed. Just like that, I pinch it, I can work my way across. Yes, you can buy the special key fob pliers. They have a plastic, like a wide plastic rectangle on the end to keep it from scratching, but essentially it's just a pair of pliers with plastic. So if you don't want to buy one, you don't have to buy one. This can be done with any pair of pliers. But here is a really fun way that I actually really enjoy doing. So let me grab, sorry for the top of my head, my cam snap again. So one of the dies that is specific to cam snap, and this is why I love my cam snap, is this one right here. And it might not look like anything crazy. It might look like just 2 rectangles, because essentially it is. These are pressing plates. These particular pressing plates are made specifically for the key fob. So they do have larger round ones for different kinds of pressing, maybe for grommets, things like that. But these are specifically made for this hardware. So you put this in, you twist this part in just like this. And because there isn't any, there's no teeth on these, they're flat, they don't have any kind of grooves, they're not gonna hurt your keychain. So when I made this one, I was just able to put that in here and then pull down my handle, and I squished it together. And so if you don't have enough power in your hands to squeeze the pliers, this is an awesome little addition. So if you're thinking about getting a rivet press, or you have one already and it's a cam snap, that is what that die set looks like. For me, totally worth it, 100%. I even took it to my retreat a couple weeks ago, and a few other people had borrowed it and just absolutely loved it. And you can use this for other things. Anything you need to press together and you need a little extra strength, you can use. Like grommets, which we're gonna talk about next. So next up in our specialty hardware is going to be grommets. So we talked about key fobs, which have a really specific use, and Diva frames and Kisslock frames. Now we're gonna talk about the snap together grommet. These are definitely something that they have a specific use. I use them on bags like this. This is the Rue bucket bag, as the place for my drawstring. I think they also really add such a nice look to the bag. I am obsessed with this chocolate brown and rose gold. I actually made this bag and wanted to carry it, and then I never did because it's just so pretty that I couldn't. But what a fun idea, and what a fun piece of hardware. But I totally understand, especially if you are new, how intimidating these can be. So this is what is called a snap together grommet. Sometimes people will also call them eyelets. It depends on where you're buying them. And this is something that you will see all over the place. You can find them on curtains. You find them on bags. You can find them on clothing. There's something that's pretty universal, and they're made for other pieces to go through them. So if I had grommets or eyelets, whichever you prefer, on the top of a curtain, my curtain rod would go through there. And actually, I think the curtains I have at home have that. For this bag, the drawstring is going to go through that. Sometimes you can even put a swivel hook through there if you wanted to add a handle and put it through the grommet. Mine are too low on this bag. This is not going to work well because they're made for this purpose, but there's a lot of different things you can do with grommets. I just tend to stick with this as my way. So there's different styles of grommets. The kind that I carry are called snap together. And when you look at the front of them, they look identical. You really can't tell the difference between the two. But when you look at the back, it's very, very subtle. But this one right here, this opening is a little tiny bit smaller. That goes into this one. This one's a little bigger, but there's a lip right here. And that's where this is going to sit. So they're called snap together because I could just take my fingers and push them together, but that's not usually strong enough. That's not usually enough of a force to really get them to stick. So what I like to do is use a rubber mallet, or even more fun, use my piece right here from Camp Snap. So we're gonna put a grommet into our little sample right here. And if you're wondering, this will be a pattern sometime in the spring. It's obviously going to appeal to everybody. I'm kidding. So let's go ahead and put in a grommet, and I'm gonna show you that it's not as frightening as you think. So in the Rue bucket bag, this particular pattern where I call for grommets, I do have a placement guide for you. It's included in the pattern. You tape your pieces together, you lay it across your band here, and you have everything ready to go, all spaced out and evenly done for you. You can also find different die sets. I think I tried to buy one. I don't know if I was successful, or I could have lost it at this point. You can find different ways, different punches and things that you can use to make the holes. But for me, I'm fine with just cutting them with scissors because they don't have to be perfect. Just like this one for the twist lock wasn't perfect, those don't have to be either. So I'm just going to randomly place this wherever I want. And I'm going to use the one that's a little tiny bit bigger, okay? Off camera, when you're closer to them, you can see the difference a little bit better. It may not be picking up for you very well. So I'm just gonna put this on here. Okay, and I'm going to trace inside. So there is my hole. That's what I need to cut out. So just like with everything else, sharp scissors, and I am going to cut on the outside of my pen. And I know that I might have to make this bigger, and that's totally fine. My piece at this point is finished. It's top stitched, it's ready to go. In this case, it's already sewn into the bag. The grommets are actually the last step that you're going to do. The reason is I don't want them to get in my way when I'm top stitching or sewing a seam and trying to finish up my bag. So I would rather have everything done. I have them marked, but I haven't put the grommets in until the very, very end. So this bag would be just about done. So I cut my hole. Let's test that. Let's see if that fits. Here's my bigger piece. Not so great. Doesn't really fit. The hole's kind of ugly too, and that's fine. I'm just gonna keep on cutting. So now that I know that I need to make it bigger, I'm gonna go maybe a 1/16 of an inch, cut around, okay. I am doing this on cork as a demo. This is also on cork. You can put these on fabric, that is totally fine, okay. So let's see. Oh, that's looking much better. Okay, we're getting closer. We're getting much closer. So I'm just gonna trim a little bit more, and I think what's actually happened is the back side, again, is kind of shifting. So I'm not cutting both sides evenly. So I'm just gonna try and clean this up. Okay. Now, when I put my grommet in, normally, I would also be adding glue because I like to glue them in to make sure that if the hole stretches, or if the hole was a little bit too big to begin with, or if anything happens, that the grommet is really extra secure, so it's snapped together and glued. So I'm gonna grab my glue because I'm actually going to set this one. I've got my glue right here. So I just tested this, and if it fits on the big one, that means this one's gonna be fine because that one goes inside of it. So the hole is plenty big. So now I'm gonna take my glue, and I'm gonna put the glue right around the outside. Okay, I'm not going crazy. This is a very strong glue. It smells really strong, but I don't need to go crazy. I don't want to make a mess. I don't want glue everywhere. I just want a little extra security. Put my pin tip. I love the pin tip on the cap. All right, I'm going to put this one in here. And for me, I don't find that one of them is the front and one is the back because they do look identical. So I wouldn't stress about that. It's in there. It fits good. I'm gonna try and squeeze it together. I'm not doing a great job, but as long as it's kind of, okay, it's not coming apart. So it's set for now. I'm gonna pull my cam snap. And instead of hitting this with a rubber mallet, which would be kind of loud to do on a YouTube video, I'm just going to use my little press here. And just like this. All right, if I want, I can put something in between to kind of protect it, but I'm just gonna give it a squeeze. And I'm even gonna turn it and squeeze from the other side. Okay, that grommet is in. That grommet is not going anywhere. But you can see if I really wanted to, I could stretch the cork and pop this out. That's why I put the glue in. So now you just have to do that 8 times and your bag's all done. I know, it's still overwhelming. It's still a lot of holes to cut, but there are a lot of tools that you can find that will make it feel better for you. If you don't want to use scissors, you can find different punches, different things. But for me, I don't mind cutting the holes. I do love using the press to really make sure it's in there. If I'm at home and I don't have that around, what I do is I just put something underneath this to protect it. You know, maybe a piece of batting or, you know, whatever I have. Put another piece over the top and I whack it with a rubber mallet and I kind of work my way around the bag and then I'll work my way around one more time. The measurement is typically the inside measurement. So just be aware of that. You want to just make sure that you know what you're getting. I like to have 2 measurements. I want to know the inside hole because I might have like a thick cord, but I also want to know the outside dimension because that's going to make a difference to my bag. If the hole is the right size, but the outside is way too big or way too small, that's going to make a difference too. So the grommets that I sell, I give you your interior and your exterior. So look out for that. Just kind of know that when you're looking and shopping for grommets. And now we're going to get into a specific type of hardware, but something that's also specialty. This is going to be strap connectors and strap anchors. There are so many different kinds available. Every time you turn around, somebody has a new one available. I could buy every single one of them and this video would go on for 3 days. There's just so many different choices. It's a really cool thing that we have, that we're lucky to have as bag makers now, where when I started back in like 2005, we definitely didn't have all these options. So I grabbed a bunch of bags here. I have a couple that are the same bag to show you how they look with different options on them. I think that's a really fun way to compare them. But first we're gonna go through some of the different types. These are the ones that I carry. You will see these on other websites. I'm going to give you as many different names as I can for them, but unfortunately everybody uses a different name and it's just not easy to keep up with that. So let's go ahead and start with these right here. This is no particular order. This is what I call an icicle. It's long, it's slim, it's, let's see how long it is actually. The piece itself is approximately 4 inches. When you add the top part, it's a little over 5. These are chunky, big pieces. So this to me is an icicle. I've also seen them called long johns, and I've also just seen them called strap anchors. So a lot of times these will just be generalized as strap anchor or strap connector. So sometimes they don't have a name. This particular kind I absolutely love, but they're not for everybody. I do hear kind of a lot of debate with this, like, oh, those are so pretty, I want to make that bag because they're just calling to me, and oh no, absolutely not, that's way too much. And it depends on the bag. You need a bigger bag or at least a longer bag in order to use these and make them doable, make them work. So these come in a set of 4, as do all the rest of the strap anchors, because you have 2 ends of each handle and you have 2 handles, so you're going to need 4. I rarely ever see these used on bags that have single handles. If that's something that you're into, that's totally fine. It's just not as common. You're going to see these more on double strap bags. So the icicles come with washers and they come with screws. There's a small pack of screws. These are not as small as the Diva screws. You can use whatever you're using for your twist lock. So you can grab kind of your medium-sized screwdriver. And again, I use my glue, okay? So when I'm putting these on a bag, and I don't have a big enough piece to fully demo this, if there's something I have talked about today and you want a more in-depth demo, please leave it in the comments. I'm happy to do that. For something like this, once again, you're gonna find your center. You're always finding your center with things like this. You're going to use the measurements that I provide in the pattern. I do have certain measurements. I'm usually anywhere from 1.5 to 2 inches from the top. I don't want to put these too high up. I want them to be kind of in the top, but not all the way at the top. Does that make any sense? Let me show you one in use. So this is a Harper. This has the cork on the front, and I did use the icicles on this. So you can see they come right to the very top edge of the bag, and that's where my handle starts. I like this. I'm happy with this look. I actually spaced them out further than I normally would because I wanted to preserve my pattern here. And that's another thing you can do. If these are going to get in the way, but they just work so well, space them out further, put them up higher, drop them a little bit lower. Whatever you have to do to not cover this up, you can totally do that. So when you're looking at this bag and you're looking at the completed bag inside, you don't see them, but you feel them. You can feel right there. That's the back of the icicle. But you're not seeing it because it's going on the back of the outside of the bag when that part's done. So all of my piecing, all of my accents, all of my sewing is done. I have a flat piece and I'm going to put this on. So I'm going to turn it over and mark on the back. I'm going to find my center. I'm going to find my measurement from the top. I draw a lot of lines. I do all my lines so I have placement marks. And then I'm just going to use my washer to mark all those holes. Now you'll notice on the washer, there's 6 holes. But on the back of the icicle, there's only 2 screws. There's only 2 per bag, or 2 per piece, excuse me. But there's these little prongs right here, these kind of stabilizer bars. When you cut all the holes, those can push through on the fabric or the cork. And you see how that kind of locks it in, makes it a little bit more secure. So when you're marking and cutting, you do want to cut a place for each of those. So how do you cut those holes? Well, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can just use your scissors, sharp pointed scissors, make a little hole, make a little X. You could also use your seam ripper and cut a little hole or a little X. Or you could go back if you have one of these and you can use your punch. You could actually punch all 6 holes. If you have a handheld punch, you can use that as well. But the holes are very important. I also use glue, but I don't use glue on the hardware, and I'll show you why. The hardware itself has a very thin edge. I would never be able to get glue just on that edge and nowhere else. That would make an absolute mess. So I put glue behind the screws, and I also glue the washer. I glue the washer to kind of stabilize it on the back side of the bag. I glue everything. I just feel better that way. And sometimes my samples, even though they're just supposed to be samples, walk away with people like my mom. And so I want to make sure that they are not going to fall apart and have a problem. I want to make sure that if my bag is actually being used, or if I actually get to use the bag, that it holds up well. So icicles, again, have screws. Not the favorite. I know screws are tough, but you don't really have to cut too many holes. You're doing very small, simple holes. The measurement in here is just over 3/4 of an inch. So it works really well with 3/4 to 1 inch wide handles. So on this one, I did trim my handle down a little bit. I am at 3/4 of an inch. It fits really nicely in here, but I have done 1 inch. It squeezes and pinches a little bit at the hardware, but it does not look bad at all. So those are going to be for thinner straps. Now, let's get into jewels. I've seen these called jewels. I've seen them called diamonds. I've also just, again, seen them called strap anchors or triangles. It kind of reminds me of a baseball diamond. I called them jewels because it looks like a jewel. It looks like the side view of a jewel. So these don't have any screws, but on the back here, they have prongs. So they come with washers. So you've got your washers here. You're gonna use 2 washers per piece, and they slide right on there and you fold your prongs over. You're gonna do the same thing with your markings. Find your center, find your placement, mark across, keep everything even. And you're going to put 2 prongs or 2 washers on the back of each piece. Those right here, this is a Kaylee bag. I don't know where my Harper with jewels went, but here is a Kaylee bag. So these, I always do with the point facing down. I have had students turn them and put the point up. You can do that. They still work that way. So if you wanted to install them like that, but they look upside down to me. Once something is what I deem as right side up, I can't turn it because it just doesn't look right. And to someone else, they might think that the point should go up and that looks right to them. Once it's in, my brain says it's upside down, but that is besides the point. So this right here, again, goes through just the front side. It does not go into the lining. You can't see it in the inside of the bag. And this inside is anywhere from 1 inch to 1.25 inches for your handle. This is 1 inch, and you can see I still have some room, but I could definitely widen my handle and do 1.25 inches, and it would fit perfectly in here. So those are the jewels. Much easier to put in. Use that same trick with your seam ripper that I showed you earlier, where you make your mark, poke in, out, and pop, and that's gonna help you to get that little opening. These, I do put some glue behind them because they're flat. So I will add a little bit of glue onto the actual hardware itself. Now, I've gotten this question a lot when I've been teaching. Do I have to sew the handles onto these before I finish the bag or after I finish the bag? And the answer is either. I have the habit of doing it while I'm making the bag. So I finish the front. This is all done and top stitched. I marked out and placed my jewels. I immediately add my handles. But you can wait, because the handles do get in the way sometimes with construction. You can wait. You can finish the entire bag and just add the handles at the end. You could also rivet them in place, and we're going to talk about rivets too. These bags were all made before I had a rivet setter, but nope, never mind. I thought I had one that I had riveted. You can totally rivet these on, especially if you don't like how your stitching looks. So that is a question I've gotten asked a lot over the years. As long as your hardware is on, because you really can't do that when the bag's done, as long as that's in place, you can add the handles while you're constructing it or when it's done. So those are the 2 bigger types of strap anchors that we carry. But what if you have a smaller bag or you have a print that you don't want to disrupt? I have a little Harper right here. And this one was small, but also it has a really pretty canvas on the front, and I didn't want to put anything big on here. I felt like the icicles were just too big. It just takes over, and all I see when I look at that bag is the icicle. I didn't want to put the jewels on there. They're a little chunky. I still wasn't loving the idea. So what I did for this bag is I used strap ends or end caps, depends on where you buy them, and strap keepers or strap bridges. And the reason they're called that, I will show you, is because they look like a little bridge. They're U-shaped and they have screws on the back. They do come in a pack of 4. They do come with washers. Here's your little washer, and they come with those same screws, and you're going to screw them in. Now, these are not keeping my handle in place. These are just keeping my handle flat. This is not, my handle could come out of there if I hadn't stitched it down. So what this is doing, this is actually covering up the stitching that's underneath. So this little bridge or strap keeper is not making my handle not fall off, because you can see my handle isn't moving. And I did that because I would rather use them as decoration. That way I can see my handle perfectly, and it's gonna be placed where I want it, and my end caps aren't gonna move, and I can make my handle look how I want it to look. So I just use these as more decoration. They are also a little bit taller than most of your finished handles, so it would be kind of hard to use these to just hold them in place. So I screw those into the fabric over my stitching. And then on the end of my handle, to make it look pretty, I use one of these. They are open on the ends, and they do have screws on the back. However, the screws are the same size as the Diva screws, and we already know that I don't like those, so I don't usually put them in. I skip it because that's the back. no one's gonna see it. So I just glue them on and call it a day. I don't even bother putting the screws in. And the screws are really small and they're just a pain in the butt. So I use these together. It's very rare that I would use one and not the other. Now also over here, this is not a strap connector, but I just wanted to grab this as well. This is another end cap. So this to me is a strap end, also called an end cap. This is just an end cap. This is a cording cap. This is what you saw right here. It's just to add a little extra finish to your cording. So you just pop it on and glue it in place. But I didn't have a good place to put that in our talk, so I just brought it over now. So now that we've discussed all of those, what if you don't like any of these? What if they're just not doing it for you? You want something simple, these are just not cutting it. In the original Harper pattern, and this bag has been sitting in the sun, so it has some very weird sun damage. That's what you are seeing in some of these spots. I'll show you the back too. That is what happens when you leave something in a window. Don't do that. So this is the original Harper pattern. I pieced all my leftover triangles together after I made a quilt because it was my friend Shayla's fabric. I loved it. I couldn't part with even a piece of it. I randomly made this front panel. So there's not a pattern for that. I just randomly sewed it together. After I got that done, I used the pattern instructions and I didn't use anything fancy. I used the cork tabs that are included in the pattern. So for this, we're gonna go back to rectangle rings. My rectangle rings, instead of being part of a slide set, became part of the handle. I made a cork tab, I slid that in between so it kind of went up and over, sewed that down, sewed the handle on, and that is my strap connector. It's made out of cork. I have seen different files of these around that you can buy and use on your cutter, but really you can make any shape that you want. You don't even need a special cutter. This is a template that's included in the pattern, but if you wanted to make it curved or you wanted to make it wider, you could do anything that you want. You're just going to double the piece so it's V'd on both ends. I wrap it over, stick it together, use some double stick tape or some glue, hold that together, and then just stitch it around and you're good to go. So there's a lot of different ways that you can anchor your straps on. And let's say that absolutely none of these appeal to you. You bought this pattern, you love this pattern, you want to make it, you don't want any of the options available, you don't want to do cork tabs, you have a really cool panel, you don't want to sew anything on the front of it. You can always attach your handles up at the top seam. You could do the same thing on this bag. You can do the same thing on this bag. You don't have to use a strap anchor, and vice versa. If the pattern you have has top handles, that means they're sewn into the seam at the top of the bag, but you want to make it fancier, you can add strap connectors to any of those bags. So let's wrap up our hardware video and talk about some of the extras, some of the bonus things that you don't necessarily need, but you might want, or you might decide at some point in your bag making career that you really love. One of those things for me is a handmade tag. I love putting these on every bag that I make. I absolutely love them because I'm happy to advertise that I made something. Now, the ones that we sell just say handmade. That's it. They're not customizable. They don't have any other sayings on them. And they have the 2 prongs in the washer, just like the half of the twist lock or the jewels. So you're just going to mark and add those just like you normally would. The one thing to remember with a handmade tag, they're not weight bearing. You're not going to put anything on them like a strap or do anything. So you can just very easily kind of find your placement wherever you want and throw it on there. So on this bag, I wanted it in the center. I can put it down here. I can put it anywhere that I want. And I didn't do anything fancy when I added that. I have my Lucy bag right here. I put it right up at the top. And some of the other bags, well, I think they all seem to have one at the top. Sometimes I put them down towards the bottom. It just depends on the look that I want. I can put them anywhere that I want. In my tutorials, I try as best as I can to include that information so that as you're working through and you want to add a tag, you know where a good place to add one would be. Some of you also have your own tags. You might have them, you know, in cork or in vinyl or even metal, and you've ordered those. And it's always fun to put those on there. If you have a business name or you have, you know, a little logo of some kind, it's fun to put on your bags because it's just nice to know, like, I made this, and whoever's carrying that has that little piece, that little reminder of me on there. So I love handmade tags. We do sell the prongs in sets of 2, but we also have this kind. So maybe you got your bag all done and it's a little bit too late to go ahead and add something that has to be, you know, that needs a washer of some kind. So these have little hooks on them, little lobster claws, and you can just hook them onto your zipper. And I think I saw one on one of these, I'm pretty sure. Yes. So on this bag, I do have my handmade tag on the front, but probably because I had this at a show, I also added it on to my zipper. And this is my rectangular zipper pull. I added it right onto the loop part right there, and it fit nicely. This was one of the older styles. We actually have the lobster claws on all of them now. But those are 2 different styles. One thing to keep in mind, I'm just gonna let you know, if you do gunmetal, they are harder to read because the writing is in black and gunmetal is dark gray. So just keep that in mind. One of the other things, this is not one of my favorites, but it is a favorite of a lot of people, is purse feet. The reason that I'm not a huge fan of purse feet, I think they look really cool. I think aesthetically, they really bump your bag up. They make it look cool. It looks really high end. A lot of your designer bags have purse feet. The reason that I don't use them often is because for me, I don't really think they're going to serve the purpose that I would want them to, or that people think that they do. A lot of times you assume that if you're putting purse feet on, it's going to keep the bottom of your bag clean. It's going to keep it off the ground. Yes and no. If you felt the bags that I carry, I overload every single one of them. My bottom, like my bag bottom, is going to touch the ground regardless of whether it has feet or not. So feet for pretty, absolutely. Feet for function, it's a no for me. But they are really cool and they're not super expensive. They are very easy to put on. You just open up these little prongs right here, which is easier when you don't have fingernails. Well, you get the gist of it. So you open those up, you have these little round washers just like with the magnets, and it's pretty easy to add on. Nothing too crazy. I don't even know if I have a sample with any on there because honestly, I just really don't use them that much. But if you like them, absolutely, you can use them. I have never seen them called anything except for purse feet. That's one of the very few hardware options that I don't see called by various names. I have seen these on different websites where they screw in, where they're bigger, they're different shapes. There's a lot of options out there. We stock the one size and one style. I sell them in a set of 8, so if you have a bigger bag and need more, you have more, or you can get 2 bags out of it. So they are fun, they're just not for me, and not every piece of hardware has to be for you. That's totally acceptable. So I'm gonna move all this aside because it's time to get out my cam snap again, and we're gonna talk about rivets. So I'm just gonna take this off, righty tighty, okay. So I'm gonna take off those pieces, and I'm going to grab my die and also my cutting die and my rivet die. So let's talk about rivets. I think this is where we're gonna wrap up this hardware talk, and then I'm gonna check my questions and see if there's anything that I've missed. So when it comes to rivets, for me, I'm a new rivet person. I have only been using rivets for about 2 years, I'm gonna say, maybe a little bit less. And it's not because I didn't like them. It's not even because I was afraid of them. It's because every time I tried to put one in, they looked horrible. And the reason was I wasn't educated on rivets, number one. Number two, I was using the very simple little plate and the post and a hammer to put them in. If you can do that really well, you are way better than I am. I never had luck with it. Part of the problem, again, I think because I was uneducated, I wasn't using the correct size. I didn't necessarily know what I was doing. And I'll talk about that when we talk about the shape and the post and all that good stuff. But because they would never come out right and they were always crooked, or I would always see the post popping through, I thought rivets were just not for me. Obviously, I'm doing something wrong. I don't like them. I'm not going to use them. Well, then I finally bought my rivet press. After many years of thinking about it and not buying one, I finally invested. and now I have 2 and a handheld. I have a problem. But the reason that I didn't like rivets was because I wasn't doing them right. So if you're putting them in and you're not liking the results, chances are you haven't been fully educated or you're missing a couple of steps, and that's fine. We all have to start somewhere. So one of the biggest things to know about rivets, if you're gonna get really big into them, I would highly suggest investing in a rivet press. I know they're expensive. This one is a tabletop. It's an expensive one, but I do have a handheld rivet press as well. That one is at home. That one is actually not that expensive and it's not hard to use. A lot of people are afraid of them because they're afraid that the squeeze part is going to be too hard on their hands. It's actually easier to use than this one. They're much less expensive and you can use the same dies. CamSnap has a great handheld press. Again, I am going to do a very in-depth rivet press video that I have not gotten to yet, and that will be included in that as well. But if you are going to get into rivets, even just rivets, and that's it, investing in the right kind of tool, whether it's the hand press or the tabletop, is going to make a difference in your life. For me, I now want to put rivets in everything. And because I have the press, I got the plates to do my key fobs. I also have the cutting die because I really love how that punches holes. I also put in snaps. So you can very slowly kind of add to it. Think about your dies the way that you have machine feet. This is my sewing machine. These are my presser feet. Each time I try something new, I add on a presser foot. So that's another thing to keep in mind with your rivet setter. Every time you do something different, whether it's a different style, a different type, or just a different size, you do need to get different dies. It is one of the downfalls, but once you decide on what you're doing and like the specific pieces you want to use, totally worth it. So the rivets that I use, and I investigated, I did not investigate. I really spent some time researching, and I ordered a lot of rivets before I started carrying them because I wanted to get the perfect size. I wanted to get something that would work on small projects and large projects, and something that was the right depth to work on the patterns that I write. Now, I don't include in my patterns rivets. I don't include that as something that you need to have. That is included in some people's patterns, and that is totally fine. I don't do that because I know that not everybody has a press. So I don't include rivets. For me, rivets are either decoration, I just add them on for fun, or they are functional, but it's also something I could have sewn. So I was making a video yesterday on this bag right here, and I did sew my slides in, but down here on my tabs, I used a rivet. You don't have to. This part could easily be sewn. That is how the pattern was written, but I chose to add a rivet because I could. So my rivets are not necessarily the only option. They're replacing the sewing part. I also use the rivets in this Laney backpack to reinforce my handles. So let's take a look at the rivet. So what I sell and what I like to use is called a double cap rivet. The reason it's double cap, I have the cap part right here, and I have a cap on my post. So when I put that together, it's finished on both sides. That means when I add it into something like this tab, I have a cap here and I have a cap on the back. I don't have a wrong and a right side. I have two sides. I'll leave that there since I keep grabbing it. So I like double cap rivets. These are also 8 by 8. So what does that mean? The cap is 8 and the post is 8 millimeters. I found that the 8 millimeter post worked perfectly with anywhere from 4 to 8 layers of cork. And that is typically where I'm going to be putting it. I might go a little less. I've never pushed it a little bit more, but the post, if it was too long and we had a much longer post, that's when you get the crooked rivet where your caps are not lined up. They kind of go like this, or you get post marks through the back of the rivet. You get a little indent because it's too big. These rivets do snap together. I'll show you that after I cut a hole, but they need to be pressed together. So they snap and then they need to be pressed, kind of like the grommets. So I have here an 8 millimeter die set for double cap rivets. If these were single cap or anything different, I would need a different die set, even if they're 8 millimeters. And the 8mm only applies to the size of the top. It has nothing to do with the post. That does not matter at all. If these were 8x10s, it would still work, as long as they are double cap rivets and the top is 8mm. So the first thing I'm gonna do is find my little piece. Here it is. Okay, my newest pattern. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to put in my punch and I'm gonna make a hole because I do need to have a hole. Without that, there's no way I'm getting this through. Now, I was having a moment a couple weeks ago and I could not find that, so I couldn't find my punch. So I actually used my stiletto from my 4-in-1 tool and made a hole and then kind of enlarged it with my scissors. Not the best way to go, but definitely in a pinch, it was fine. It was just something I had to do because I just didn't have the right tools here. So what I'm gonna do is, again, I'm gonna mark. So I'm marking wherever I want this rivet, okay? And I'm gonna put this together and do like a little pinch right here, but I'm just gonna mark on this side. So there is my little mark, okay? This is only 2 layers of cork. It's not gonna look great and my rivets are too long for that. And when I put my rivet here, there's a tiny little indent right there in the rivet. If there is too much space between here, that's when you're going to get the crooked rivet or you're going to get the post indent. Your fabric should come and cover up the majority of that post. It's very hard to hold that, but your post should be completely covered or very close to being covered. There shouldn't be a lot of wiggle room. That's how you know it's the right size. So I'm gonna go through all 4 of these layers. I'm just gonna fold this, take it over here, make my hole. Okay, and that die went right through 4 layers of cork. I'm just poking out the little confetti. So I don't know if this is right or wrong, but for me, I just found that however I put it in is how I put it in. What I mean by that, my post is here. If this is the front or this is the front, I have not found that it makes any difference because there's 2 caps. So my post is here. I'm gonna take my cap, click it together. Some of them are harder to click than others. So if you're struggling, just give it, give it a little elbow grease, it will go. So now my rivet's in, but it needs to be pressed. So I'm gonna take this off and I'm going to put in my double cap rivet set. And you can see they are the same on both sides. One just drops in and one screws in. That in. Okay, put this right in here and give it a pop. And there it is. Looks good on both sides. It's not coming out. You don't have to add any kind of glue or anything to this. Rivets, again, are great for decoration or they're great for functionality. You can use them for both. You will not find them written into one of my patterns. I will always be using this in place of sewing, but I will make sure that you will be able to sew. So if you don't have one of these, it's okay. That's just me. I have, again, seen it written into patterns, and that's fine. Just be aware of it and check the size of the rivets that are called for in the pattern so that you know how thick they need to be. For me, the millimeter size of the top, you can vary on that. If you have 8 or 9 or 10 and you're okay with that size, I think that's fine. Check your post size. The post size is the most important part of the rivet because if it's too big or too small, it's not gonna work. And honestly, I'd rather be on the small side than the big side because if they're tight, and this is really tight to get through all these layers, it's going to really hold well. If the post is too long, that's when you're gonna get a really not so great looking rivet. So I've got some questions that I had over some different platforms and I wanted to try to answer them for you. So one of the questions that I was asked on TikTok by user LollyJ21 was what styles and types of hardware work best with what style bags? I used to make all fabric bags and I would like to expand my skills. What are the basics? Well, that is that's a great question. It's a lot to kind of unfold because there are just so many different styles and types of bags and so many different styles and types of hardware, as we've already discussed. So what I would always recommend to you is to take a look at the bag itself and ask yourself this question. What do I want the finished bag to look like? Do I want it to be something kind of cute and kitschy? Do I want it to be based on the fabric? Do I want it to be really elegant and carry it to a wedding or a formal event? Because to me, certain styles of hardware definitely reflect differently. They definitely change the look of the bag. So one of my absolute favorite examples that I think kind of embraces this question is to show off these two bags, okay? I show these a lot when I'm traveling and teaching. I take my tags off. So this is the Ellie handbag, okay? And Ellie is super fun. She's got a really cool zipper in the front, and she has some fun hardware. Again, going back to strap anchors, I could add any kind that I want here. But for me, I wanted to make this bag, I wanted it all out of cork. I knew that already. I wanted it to be classic. I wanted it to be seasonless. And what I mean by that, we all have those certain colors that speak to different seasons. Warm fall colors are one thing. Winter colors and blues, those are different. Spring colors, pastels. So we always look at color as kind of something associated with times of year or styles. I wanted something classic. I wanted something that was not going to go out of style or out of season. And so what did I pick? Black and white. Now, I could have gone in so many different directions with the hardware. I chose rose gold because it gave me just enough contrast, but not too much. Had I chosen to do something else, let me look at my bin of hardware here. Had I chosen to add on rainbow, that is a huge difference. That makes this bag not as elegant, but a little bit more funky. And again, these are just my opinion. So if you disagree, that's totally okay. You can tell me politely. But to me, adding rainbow and a rainbow zipper, this bag just got real funky. It got real young, if that sounds right. It almost looks like something that, you know, me, somebody in my early 40s, maybe I don't want to carry that. Maybe that's a little bit too crazy. I want something a little bit more elegant. I want something more subdued. So the rainbow, I love the rainbow. It just wasn't speaking to me and the look that I wanted for this bag. So then I could also look at doing brass. And I did a sample of this, identical with brass, and it looks really cool. It still gives me that classic look. Doing gunmetal was going to blend down here, and my zipper wasn't going to have its moment because it would have been all black on the bottom. My zipper would have blended in, and that's not what I wanted. Silver would have added a lot of contrast right here, the same as yellow gold. So I picked the rose gold because it was warm. It blended nicely with the white. It gave just a little contrast. And on the black, it also wasn't overpowering, but it kind of just looked right. So that was the style that I wanted for this bag. Now the next bag, I wanted to look very different. I was going for funky, wacky, different kind of a bag. These are the same pattern. I know that might be hard to believe, but these are the exact same pattern. The reason they look so different, this one is not as elegant. This one has monkeys and cherries on the top. I made this when this fabric line came out several years ago. The monkey is holding a wrench with his tail. That does not necessarily speak to elegance. I also have bright purple. I have silver, which contrasts, and I have smaller hardware. So I really could show off this fabric with the smaller hardware. So the look that I was going for this bag definitely took it to a different place. It's much more juvenile. It's much more funky. And I also think that carrying this bag, I'm gonna get tired of it more than I'm gonna get tired of this one. This is very classic. So that is how your hardware can change up what you're doing, but also your materials. Using cork on this and using solid cork, I let the hardware speak, but the cork itself kind of has its own voice in this. I used a little bit of contrasting thread just on the black, not up here, just here. So that is how you can change a bag completely with fabric, with cork, and also with your hardware. So if you want to step up your game and you want to step up from this to this, it's a matter of choices and it's a matter of doing more simple things. Simple is very elegant. this is very busy. Pat H on Facebook had asked the question, how do you decide what sizes and styles to use? And I think that question can also be answered by this same example. Using the bigger style hardware definitely added something to this bag. This bag was plenty big enough to do that. Adding the smaller one, I think, lets the fabric speak more. So in deciding on sizes, a lot of times it's based on what I want to stand out, especially when it comes to strap connectors. Do I want the cork to stand out on this, or do I want the hardware to be the star of the show? In this one, it's all about the fabric. I almost don't even notice the hardware because that is the intention of this bag. Where this one, I think that the hardware definitely stands out, but for me, when I look at this, I see the overall look. As far as the size is concerned, these are very big anchors. These are almost 5 inches in length. I would not put them on a bag that was small. I wouldn't want them on anything too small. I've used them on Kaylee. Let me find a small bag here. Let's say this Lola right here. I decide that instead of doing this single adjustable handle, I want to amp up this bag. Those icicles are going to be enormous on this bag. That is going to be a lot. So for me, all I'm seeing is the icicle. It's way too overpowering. So it's a lot of times just trial and error and kind of playing around with what you have. For me, this is a nice simple bag. I could add maybe some rivets, maybe amp it up, but also this bag is so small that I think a double handle almost would make it look like it was for a child, if that makes any sense. So a lot of times it's really just playing. And trust me, as I mentioned before, I think that I know where I'm going with a pattern. I start making it and I change my mind. The Charlotte bag that I had that I thought I was absolutely going to add a flip block to, and the flip block was too big. So it's definitely something that you play around with, but ask yourself what you want to speak on the bag. What do you want to be the thing that stands out? Mary on Facebook also asked, do you mix hardware colors? Now for me, this is 99% no. I like sticking with one hardware color and just kind of, using the same color throughout. It's just something that's more pleasing to my eyes. Since I picked rose gold, I used rose gold for everything. On here, I used rainbow for everything. But there can come times when it's not possible. Maybe I'm making something at home or I'm working on something with a new piece of hardware and I don't have all the colors. Have I mixed hardware? Yes, a teeny tiny little bit. So I have this Everly backpack. I'm going to start with the back of it. And it's a very hardware heavy bag. There's a lot of things going on. It's a convertible bag, so this can unhook and it can become a crossbody. I chose all gunmetal. I like the gunmetal with the cocoa. I thought it was really nice, really simple. But on the front, I'm not going to show you yet, I used my gunmetal twist lock and I thought, you know what might look kind of fun? What about a pop of rainbow? So my handmade tag is rainbow. If I'm being 100% honest, it's not my favorite. At the moment, I thought it was kind of fun. I did get a few faces from people because they were like, why would you do that? I was just trying it out. I have mixed rainbow with gunmetal and rainbow with silver because sometimes it works. I put rainbow pulls on silver zippers and I've mixed and matched a little bit for the most part, and it's a personal choice. I don't really mix and match. I like to stick with one color. I think that it makes your bag look more elegant, and I think that it makes it look less homemade, if that is okay to say. I want my bag to look like I bought it in a boutique. I want people to be confused and thrown back when I say, no, I made this bag. Now, I have a really good friend, and she mixes and matches all the time. I don't know if she does it because it's what she has on hand and she just uses it, or if she just truly likes doing that. I've never actually asked her, but I know that she mixes and matches. And when I look at her bags, I'm not bothered by it because it was her choice. On my own bag, when I make it, I don't like to mix and match metals. I also wear all silver tone jewelry. I do have a few pieces, some earrings that have gold and silver, and I like them, but I do tend to stick with one tone. So that is not, there's not a wrong answer for that. Personal choice, no, I do not mix colors. Okay, we have 2 more questions from Instagram. The first one is from So Gigi So, and she wants to know what is the best type of handle for wool bags and what is the best way to apply it to the bag? And that's a great question. So I have worked with wool before, but I don't work with it very often. So this is just one of the bags that I happen to have around that was wool. So my tips for you with a wool bag is to interface it. Make sure that this wool is completely stabilized on the back, because wool is a knit product. It could easily pull apart. If you're putting holes in it, you kind of lose them sometimes. So sometimes marking them can be a little challenging, but also I wouldn't want this to rip. And I can tell that this piece of hardware is so stable in here because I interface the back of it. I use Decor Bond. Sometimes I will also use Decovil Light, something that is going to really stabilize it. And as far as the best type of handles, that's again, whatever type you want. If you wanted to just sew these handles up in the top, you could do that. I did use strap anchors. They are secure, they are glued in place, they are screwed from the backside, they have extra interfacing behind them. I use the washers, and I don't have any fear that these are going anywhere. They're nice and secure. So you can definitely work with felted wool. Like I said, I've done it a little bit. I just don't have too many samples with it, but it's really, really fun. Little on the pricey side, but also something I hear a lot of people thrifting and finding like cool wool jackets or blankets and cutting them up and making them into bags. So our last question, and then we're gonna wrap up for today, is from Troop Love 07. She asked if I have any suggestions for a pattern or something specific for a wedding party that's black tie, a gift to give to the bride or bridesmaids. Well, my go-to for anything like that is always going to be one of these clutches, okay? I know I have kind of a mess going on here, but it's our last question. So this is the pleated clutch. Now, do you have to do the pleats? No, absolutely not. You could also make this clutch out of a really nice high-end fabric. I did this one all out of cork, same pattern, I just didn't pleat it. So if you had a really nice silk or something, I'm not really good with all of those fabrics, I just think silk, but if you had a really high-end fabric that matched the bridal party, maybe a satin or a sateen or something that goes with their dresses or something that goes with the bride's dress, something that maybe has some lace on it, you could absolutely make something like this. You could give them the option to have the little handle. You've got your tabs right here. Make something really pretty and elegant, maybe beaded, kind of, jazz it up a little bit. But for a wedding, these would be my go-to. Something along these lines in a really nice high-end fabric, maybe a little beading, a little lace, a little something that goes with the theme of the wedding. You could even add on some kind of, flower decoration or something maybe they could even remove and use later. This would definitely be my go-to for a wedding. So I hope that answers all your questions. I think I got all of them that I didn't answer in the video. If I missed your question, I do apologize for that. Thank you so much for joining me in this very fun to make video. I had a blast going through all of the hardware. It's kind of fun to see all of the things that I carry in one spot because I don't always look at them. I kind of forget sometimes all of the hardware I have. And especially considering that I started with literally one piece of hardware, to know that I've expanded to all this is still a little bit crazy to me. So I hope that I answered all of your questions. If you have any other questions or anything else you'd like me to demo, please go ahead and leave it in the comments. I would be happy to answer that for you. And I'm always happy to work on new videos. If you like this, don't forget to click subscribe, click the little notification bell, and give it a thumbs up. Thank you.